Hello and welcome to Media Musings. Today's topic is the classic Western, True Grit. Special thanks, as always, to my patrons Santi the Sane, GeoSam, and Julie LaVoice. And, of course, hello to the one person lurking in the chat and whoever might be watching in the future.
Howdy.
Also...
Come on, you've got to. It's a Western.
Also, I am currently in a race with Godless Scummer and Godless Sewing. If I beat them to my goal of 200, then I will do my embarrassing story stream while drinking like a cider or a beer, which Noodle can confirm is enough to get me well plastered.
Okay, a cider or a beer, you make sure it's a day you're not working and you've got nowhere to drive afterwards.
Yeah.
Ring is, I would call Ring a lightweight, but that would be an insult to lightweights.
Yeah. So if you want to see me plastered on stream, get your friends to subscribe.
It is fun to watch, I will give you that.
Yeah.
It is very fun to watch when you're drunk.
And hello to the lurking hissy.
The lurking hissy as opposed to the one who's on stream.
Yes. Okay. So I had actually seen True Grit before. It's one of my favorites of the Westerns that I've seen.
Yeah, but you grew up in, like, Montana or somewhere, so I imagine you've seen a lot of Westerns.
Actually, not that many.
Huh. Then again, I suppose you're too busy watching Christian movies.
Yeah.
I'll wind you up, I don't mind.
Yeah. But, meanwhile, as far as I'm aware, this was your first time seeing it?
I saw it once as an undergrad. Now, I graduated nearly 8 years ago, so...
Yeah.
You may as well say that I saw it for the first time today when I watched it for this stream.
Yeah.
Speaking of that, yeah. You know, I like to keep notes as I go along of things I want to talk about. Hence, inky fingers, excuse me, my pen just leaked as the intro was running. What can I do?
Yeah.
That'll teach me to use a cheap fountain pen with good ink. Especially good ink because it won't come off my hands. Anyway, moving on. You just have to deal with it. I'll wash my hands when we're finished or something. Cool. So, yeah, first time I've seen this in a long, long time. Last time I watched it, I was forced to watch it, and I was in the unenviable position that every undergraduate knows of, or at least has experienced once. I've been on what was it? Was it a first year or a second year module? Either way, it was a module on the American West. And this entire module, it must have been the first year because I did the city in the second year. This entire module was basically written so the tutor had an excuse to fanboy about Westerns for 8 weeks. This is my theory. Because every week we had an article to read, a book chapter to read, and a Western to watch.
Yeah.
He gave over we only had 5 contact hours a week. This is a humanities course. We're not spending hours in a lab. He gave over 2 hours every week at the Friday lecture, which he specifically, most tutors hate having the Friday afternoon slot for lectures.
Yeah.
He literally took it, and every week he'd show the film we were supposed to be watching. So we'd watch like Chantilly Lace and Tombstone and shit. And you know what? Power to the guy. He did that in first year, and then there was another tutor who did the American City in second year. I ended up on that module as well. And he did the same thing with the Friday afternoon slot. So they booked up all the lecture theatres that had big screens for that one. Power to the guy. I hated Westerns.
Yeah.
I will hold my hands up and say I grew up hating Westerns. Not because my parents hated them or anything like that, but because my parents loved them. Like every Sunday, my mother would sit down and want to watch some shit like Chantilly Lace or something. And if John Wayne was on TV, my mum was watching it. And the only way we weren't watching John Wayne on a Sunday is if we were watching Formula One, because my dad took over the TV. Like, there is a reason I had a television in my bedroom by the time I was about 8 years old, because I couldn't stand watching either of those things. And they couldn't stand dealing with me not wanting to watch it and being forced to watch it.
Yeah.
So they just bought me a small, like, £20 TV for my bedroom. And I'd go up there and I'd watch my Cartoon Network or whatever I wanted to watch.
Yeah.
Because it used to drive them crazy when they were watching something and I was sat reading a book, which for some reason my parents found weird. And so I didn't grow up watching a lot of Westerns.
Yeah.
But my parents really liked old films. If it had John Wayne in it, if it had who was the other one? The one who always did the films out of Africa and Bridge on the River Kwai and all those kind of Sunday afternoon films. My mum watched all of them and I hated all of them.
Yeah.
I have to this day never seen the full Dirty Dancing, because every time my mum used to put it on, I used to walk out the room. I've never seen it. I couldn't stand it. And that's the reason I don't like Star Wars, because my dad used to watch it every time it was on TV. And that's why I've never seen it all the way through. So that's my little rant. But I've been pleasantly surprised as an adult to find that some of these films are actually quite good. They're reasonable. Some of them are better than others. This is one of the better ones. I really don't like the ones with the long lingering looks between the leading lady and the cowboy who's just rode into town. And I much prefer my spaghetti westerns. I like spaghetti westerns.
Yeah.
And this to me is it's got the action potential of a spaghetti western, i.e. there's no long lingering shots of the planes. Like, if I wanted to look at a travel magazine, I would have gone and found a travel magazine. So I do like this film. It cuts down on the wastage, and there is an actual plot, and it doesn't feel... Some westerns you sit and watch, and they're 2 hours long, and they feel 2 hours long.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying? They feel...
Yeah.
Yeah. This film, 2 hours long, and I'm looking at it, and I'm looking at my watch, and I'm thinking... Is this film going to finish in time? Because the plot's moving along, and westerns are supposed to be slower than this. And how are they going to fill this time? We get to the point sort of an hour in, and I'm looking and I'm going, this film's over in the next 10 minutes if it carries on at the same pace. What are they going to fill the time with? And then I realised, it's not over. Keep on keeping on. And it actually... kept me interested. Normally, if there's a western on and I'm watching it, I'm also pottering about tidying up or whatever. None of that today.
Yeah.
So, good film.
Yeah.
Don't get higher praise than that. Someone who can't stand the genre sat and watched it.
Yeah, and also, True Grit is one of the... I think is the only John Wayne movie where he instead of the role disappearing into him, he disappears into the role. Yeah.
I will say it does help that there was no weird love triangle going on.
Yeah.
Because Westerns do romance really badly. Despite how much they base themselves around it a lot of the time, they do romance really badly. At least for my modern sensibilities of, I don't want a man who thinks I should stay home churning butter, thank you. So that was nice, and it was nice to have... Westerns do sometimes have female characters, and you're going to hear me mention Chantilly Lace a lot, That's because of all the films I was forced to watch in that American West module. Chantilly Lace is the only one I remember. And the Tombstone is he with Kevin Costner in Tombstone?
Well, okay.
The modern version, the remake, not the original.
So here's the thing. It's like half of all the showdown westerns are based on the gunfight at the OK Corral. Know why?
Yeah. Because it's the only showdown we've got record of.
Basically.
I have an uncle who especially likes westerns, so I have technically seen True Grit.
Yeah.
Because I was in the room while it was on.
Yeah.
Equally, I was doing Sudoku.
Yeah, okay, this is valid.
When I say my uncle loves westerns, I mean my cousin's middle name is Wyatt Earp.
That's a funny name for a cowboy. It's a bad name for a cowboy.
Terrible name for a cowboy.
Sorry, I had to.
Yeah.
Yeah, Wyatt Earp the lawman.
Yeah.
So, yeah. Sorry, I was just getting an ashtray, don't mind me.
Yeah.
This film, great that it doesn't have a weird romantic subplot.
Yeah.
So this is what I find westerns like to have. What I call the perky girl.
Yeah.
The girl who thinks she can ride with the men, but eventually it'll turn out she can't, and she ends up falling in love with one of them. That's the standard Western romance.
Yeah.
So it was nice to see the girl character not get sidelined halfway through.
Yeah.
Despite best efforts, I might add.
It really, in some ways, Maddie is the character that has the true grit.
That's the whole point of the film, yeah.
Yeah.
Maddie has the true grit, and she's looking for a man with true grit.
I mean, having read through various synopses and having vague memories of it, it certainly seemed like, okay, no, this character here is the one who is dealing with the bullshit.
Yeah, no, Matty is a good character, and I think that's what I like about this one, as opposed to other westerns I've seen where the women are either crying in doorways, handing over handkerchiefs as the men ride past, or or they're hookers basically.
Yeah.
Hi guys.
So it's nice to see a female character in it.
I've got to say a little thing, just I know I'm kind of opening myself up for spoilers at the end, because I've never actually I was trying to watch this earlier today and I did not get the chance to finish it. So I've maybe got about halfway to 2/3 of the way through this, but yeah, I did like her in this, especially the thing when she was rode the horse across the river while they were on the sort of ferry across, and Rooster's sort of thing was just like
she reminds me of me.
She reminds me of me, and it's like that first little thing is like, I kind of have a grudging respect for her right now, Yeah,
it's like she literally, as he put it, he says she's earned her spurs. And that's the thing. Okay, do I like that it's presented that the only way to be respected in this film is to act like a big outdoorsman? No, but it's a Western. What do you expect? If you want like world-class modern feminism, go read a book.
Well, also, in this situation,
for its context in the film and for the context of the plot, it's a very feminist film.
Yeah, well, also, essentially playing devil's advocate in the context of the situation. Rooster Cogburn and Ranger LaBeef are going on a manhunt out in the wilds. You don't really want to bring anyone who can't handle themselves, man or woman, out into the wilds to go on a manhunt.
Yeah, but the whole point is that they assume that she can't handle herself, and quite clearly she can. I ought to remind you of the first time we went camping and the assumptions your family had about me, although they were a little bit friendlier about it.
Oh, did they assume you wouldn't make it?
They assumed I was a bit of a city slicker.
Yeah.
And then I showed up and made a Rorschach flamethrower to build the fire and jumped into the lake with a bar of soap when I wanted a wash. That's
the thing. It's not just the fact that she's a woman that they don't think she can handle. It's the fact that she appears to come from a bit of a privileged background. Rich daddy, all that sort of stuff.
She draws Lawyer Daggett like a gun.
And her family own property.
Yeah,
which it is kind of a big deal. She's upper middle class. A couple of decades later in a different genre of film, and Daddy's, she's on the same sort of class level as the frigging the kids from The Sound of Music.
Yeah.
That's the kind of class she is, but she just exists in a context where that is something different. You can see her being... She's very much... You'll have all seen at least one episode of The Wallens.
Yeah.
They could afford to have 7 children in the wilds. They weren't poor. Her family ain't poor either.
Whatever you just referenced, I can pick up from context clues, but I don't know what that actually is.
Good night, John boy.
Sam, just save yourself. Do not watch any of the Waltons.
Oh, I had to sit through that with my mum as well. So save yourself.
Just don't. It's not good.
It's basically the origin story of the family that owns Walmart. Sorry, the origin myth of the family that owns Walmart.
Done as a multi-season TV series.
Yeah, multi-gen.
I say this partially in humor. Oh, propaganda then.
Yeah, pure propaganda.
It's very much in sort of similar vein of shows like Little House on the Prairie as well. It's very much in that vein of
Don't do it.
Don't do it, Sam. Save yourself.
Yeah.
We had to sit through that. So your generation, we fought that war. So your generation doesn't have to.
If you want to watch, I mean, to me, I'd say if you do want to watch like a classic real old Western series that's may not necessarily have aged quite so well now, but I'd always say Rawhide I enjoyed. That's a good one to watch. But
I never saw that. It probably didn't have enough romantic subplots to keep my mum's interest, I imagine.
I
imagine anything my mum was interested in, you wouldn't have been scummer.
It was just very weird to see now to actually see Clint Eastwood with a young baby face, sort of, it's quite sort of strange to see now.
Wait, you're telling me Clint Eastwood wasn't born with like a 5 o'clock shadow when that glare that liquefies your kidneys?
Yeah. There's a very young, clean-shaven, pretty boy Clint Eastwood in this.
Oh, yeah. Do any old classics age well?
I think this one has.
Yeah. In some ways, in other ways, it's obviously a product of its time.
Yeah, it's obviously a product of its time, but it does age well in that it's not a product of its time in the same way as The Sound of Music, or not The Sound of Music, The Colour Purple, or what's the other one? I can hear it. I can see the film in my head. What is it? The white woman who takes on the black woman and claims she's a... There's some films that really age badly. Sarah Jane.
Gone with the Wind.
Well, Gone with the Wind ages badly as well, but that's
Gone with the Wind. Gone with the Wind wasn't even that good at the time, but
I think that aging well isn't necessarily going to mean it looks as though it
Imitation
could have been
of
made.
Life. Imitation of Life is what I'm talking about.
Yeah.
That's a film we should do one day.
I'll say this because, as I said, I didn't get. Unfortunately, because I got a bit distracted early, I did not get a chance to sit all the way through this movie today. That being said, what I saw of it, I think it's aged sort of well enough to where I could see why they decided to make a remake of this. There's a lot of old westerns they're not going to. I could see why they made it, and you know and in some ways, like some of and I know you pointed out the irony of this in our group actually earlier that the classic western, the classic era western we're actually watching is actually newer than the sort of spaghetti western that we're going to be covering next week, which sounds strange to say, but in some ways this is aged better than some of the spaghetti westerns.
If you showed me a Terence Hill Bud Spencer movie, it's going to have a fuck ton more sexism in it than this did.
Yeah.
And that's any Terence Hill or Bud Spencer movie you can think of. And there's going to be racist tropes. And don't get me wrong, we have the Chinese man, but, it's almost affectionate, is this film. Yeah. Whereas certain other films you look at and you think, no.
and there is a slight comment made when the peace officer at the general store is getting his haircut.
Yeah, that comment went down a bit harsh, down the wrong way, didn't it?
Yeah.
I mean, don't get me wrong. Again, Played for Laughs, really affectionate, and I think what this film does really well. And this is something that I actually discussed as an undergrad, so I'm dredging the memories. It's surprisingly inclusive for its time. We're talking 1969.
Yeah.
This film was released. So it's made in the mid-60s. You've got black characters who aren't slaves, obviously. I don't have a black eye, it's just the way my makeup's gone. Don't panic, anyone. You have I'm going to say native, even though they say Indian in the film because times have changed.
Yeah.
Native characters who A, have speaking parts and B, aren't the enemy. Yeah. And you have women who aren't for just cooking, breeding, and whoring.
Yeah.
It's actually
in fact, a woman who is the protagonist of the movie.
She is the protagonist.
Really? Yeah.
The entire point of the film is that she's the one with true grit.
Yeah. She's the protagonist more than Rooster Cogburn is.
Yeah. I think the whole point for me, she's the catalyst in this film. Cogburn has a nasty reputation, and I'm sure we'll get into a discussion about the power of reputation in the Wild West.
Yeah.
But his reputation precedes him.
Yeah.
No one likes him, but they see him as a necessary evil.
Yeah. I mean,
she comes along and she makes him into a decent man. Because but he views her as a sister. And it's really important that he views her as a sister, and that's not a romantic subplot, because the romantic subplot of the woman who comes along and fixes the man so he marries her is done to death.
Yeah.
Although the ending, you can talk about a pseudo marriage promise thing going on there, but it's a stretch.
Yeah, I see it more as a recognition that they are essentially family now.
Yeah, they are family, but they are family in the. Yeah, no, they are family in the, and meta alert. They are found family in the sense of things like The Godfather. They are family in the sense of films where characters are brought together. They are family in the way the unit in Saving Private Ryan are a family. They've been to hell and back together, and that's formed a bond.
They are family in the way that anyone in a Vin Diesel movie is family.
Yeah, they are family as in if you reach for the chicken, you say grace. Yeah. You know,
that is. I'm sure that's probably the first and last time that anyone is going to make a comparison between the movie True Grit and Fast and the Furious.
Actually, there's quite a few comparisons to be made.
Yeah.
There is quite a few comparisons to
Can
be
we
made.
not?
if
Can
you'd
we?
like me to.
Can we not do that? But,
We'll see. If you're good, Jeff, I'll keep it to a minimum.
yeah, well,
But
I'll keep it to a minimum and only make the reference to the horses.
yeah. Well, if we start having the horses doing the quarter-mile drag, we know we've gone over the edge.
Well, you know, when we're talking about big butch American horses versus little chicken-brained Texan horses,
yeah,
Oh, yeah.
there's a joke to be made there.
Yeah, I guess from what I gathered in terms of a historical period, we gathered that this is after the Civil War. That
Yes.
is something
Yeah.
we gathered because it is alluded to that. I didn't quite, as I said, I only got to a certain point, but they were sort of somewhat talking about this, and Bob was asking the Texan guy, you know, LeBeouf, which side were you on? Like,
And all it gives is the name of the general.
He
yeah,
only gives the name of the general. We do gather from from Cockburn that he was a Confederate because he mentions Quantrill. That he served.
Does. But also there's a comment to be made about how these men, and it's specific to these men in the film. Notice how the hangman is described as a Yankee. Now, this film is based in Arkansas. So you expect them to be Confederates.
Yeah.
But notice how any man who talks about his military service talks about the general he served under, not the side he was on.
Yeah.
And it's almost as if when Rooster asks LeBeouf, what side were you on, he expects him to say he was on the side of the North.
Which
And
is
it's almost an insult.
which is interesting, seeing as how Texas was sided with the Confederacy.
Exactly, and that's a real. That's the insult in that comment there.
It actually caused them Texas to remove the state governor Sam Houston because he wanted to remain within the Union, so he was actually removed because of that.
Yeah,
and but I mentioned because Cockburn is said to with Quantrill. Quantrill was a real historical figure, and who's led, shall we say, a very irregular Confederate unit. I mean, they were kind of more on, they'd be closer to sort of raiders, pirate types rather than regular soldiers.
The comment is past that they were basically mercenaries, isn't it?
Yeah, they were bandits.
Yeah,
they were. I mean, effectively, it's kind of there were a couple of Confederate people. There's one called Quantrill, and then a guy called Bill Anderson as well. That led, and then they mainly operated in the sort of Kansas, Missouri kind of area, which was kind of the edge of the United States at the time. So they're really on. They're out. They're on the front.
They're on the frontier.
They're on the frontier. That these people are.
So Turner can shut his damn mouth.
But you know, the movie itself only briefly touches on the Civil War, so I think our discussion of the movie should leave it at that.
Yeah, one thing I do want to point out though, because that point I was making about their name, the generals, these are men who are loyal to other men, not to higher ideals.
Yeah.
They're loyal to the men they fought with. They're not loyal to... They don't give a damn about any constitution or states' rights or whatever you want to call whatever politics were going on. Their opinion is of the man they were following. And that's how they identify. They don't give a damn about the wider war. And that's actually something that I think people miss in Southern politics. Now, I will be the first to say tear down the damn statues and stick them in a museum. I will absolutely say that. But you've got to stick them in a museum with a proper commentary and a proper explanation. But you also have to understand that the people who followed these men, 9 times out of 10, the average person on the street doesn't give a flying fuck about the wider politics, and he's just following the man he's loyal to and who's promised that he'll be able to come home to his family.
Yeah.
and who's kept that promise.
Which is
And
also,
you know, especially in the American South today, people who are descended from those soldiers, I can understand why it bothers them that these statues are being torn down. I don't think they're going about it the right way, and I absolutely don't sympathise with what they claim their reason for wanting to leave them up are. But if they were actually honest about the reasoning and honest about the roles their ancestors played, they'd probably have a stronger argument for leaving those statues where they are.
Yeah.
I think
very quick side note, and I will make this quick, I promise. But what Noodle was saying there, again, absolutely true, historical basis for it. Even during the English Civil War, there were regiments that actually swapped sides on numerous occasions, some of them, but it was because the person running the regiment swapped sides and the people were loyal to him, and what was going on in their area, what affected them directly, kind of thing, rather than the big picture here. So that's
this is why the rebellions in Yorkshire started.
Very quick side note, anyway.
Yeah, that's why the rebellion started in Yorkshire in the English Civil War, because they were closing the monasteries, and the monasteries are the people who are feeding the poor people, and the people who are fighting back are the poor people because they're hungry.
Yeah.
That's the logic of it.
And one last thought from me, it's like also the reason why the one kind of location where I don't consider the Stars and Bars a treason rag is Virginia cemeteries.
Any cemetery where there's a Confederate soldier who was killed in action is buried has the right to fly that flag, and I will stand by that. Because at the end of the day, that person could have descendants, and that person died, regardless of anything else, ultimately for that flag. Now, yes, they were following a single person, but they were following that person under that flag. Yeah. And there's got to be a level of respect for the fact that people live. Now, I don't like it. I'm half black. You know, I'm not good. I don't like that flag. You saw the way I walked out of that gas station when I saw it ring when I was in America.
right next to Lincoln.
Yeah, no, literally, there's a gas station in Illinois. You go in, you step through the door, and you look up, and there's a photo of Lincoln, an A4 picture. And right under it, there's a flag stand of flags for sale, and there's a giant-ass Confederate flag hanging on it. For sale. I didn't even look at the price. I was so annoyed. I turned around and walked out.
I'm going to say, I went to the State Cemetery in Frankfort, Kentucky, where there is a Confederate battle flag flying there, because there is a section for Confederate war dead. And I had no problem, and I had zero problem with that. And I think it was actually, of all people, I think Ulysses S. Grant probably said it best, that they were brave, loyal men who fought for a cause, even if that cause was the lousiest one men ever fought for.
And like we said, they weren't fighting for that cause; they were fighting for the men they were following.
Yeah.
But anyways, I am sorry. I'm just going to do this because I'm just a little anal on this point, and I'm sorry. I just want to be clear about the Confederate battle flag and the Stars and Bars are two different flags, just so people know. So
listen,
I am a little on that point. I don't know, So
listen, if you go to German sections of cemeteries in France, there's a German flag flying.
Yeah.
And I mean specifically a German flag.
Yeah.
There is a German flag flying, which is right and proper, because they were fighting for their country, regardless of who was running it. I would have a problem if there was a swastika flying.
But
but there isn't. There's a German flag flying.
Quick side note. I think you saw it, Ring. You saw the little meme I shared today, the sticker, the One Nation Under God.
Yeah.
I said it all with a US flag and a Confederate battle flag, and I'm like, anybody see the problem with this picture here?
But that's the reason. Well, the reason I was referencing the Confederate battle flag because what we recognize today as the Confederate flag was actually the flag of the Army of Virginia.
Yeah.
Which is why I said specifically Virginia.
Yeah. So I think it's an important topic that we've brought up because it does permeate this film. At the end of the day, the whole point is it's just another part of that, the masculinity of these characters, that they're all war veterans. They've already earned their stripes, as it were. And she's coming into this as a little girl, basically. Because she's what, like 15, if that?
Yeah.
I wouldn't put her at more than 17.
Well, no, we know. Okay, so given the culture of the era in regards to marriage, and a certain thing LaBeef says to her when he meets her,
I presume she's 16.
I'd put her somewhere between 14 and 16.
Yeah, because she assumes he was talking to her mother.
Great.
No,
Yeah,
if you were older, I would kiss you.
Yeah, which
Comment.
says she's not the age of consent, but she's old enough for him to be looking.
Great Wizard Google says 14.
Okay.
That sounds about right.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, that sounds about right.
Yeah.
But I think it's important that we pass that comment because I think films like this show it best. There is an argument to be made for. There is a place for learning about these generals and these people in this war, and giving them a voice. But it has to be done on an understanding of what they actually understood they were fighting for, which is not the same thing that the ideals that were going on, or is not the politics of the time. They were fighting for their own homesteads and their families and their home places, which I don't care what war you're in. I don't care what time period you're in. If you are going to war to protect your family, your loved ones, your home, you absolutely have my respect.
Yeah.
Because you are fighting for your right to live. And I don't think there's anything more American than that, but there's definitely nothing more human than that.
Yeah.
With Americans and the whole, the right to the pursuit of happiness.
Yeah.
All the rest of it. It's got that flavour to it, but it is human to want to defend where you're from. And a man's home is his castle.
Though something subversive to the American character about this movie is all the gun shaming that LaBeef gets.
There's there's something a little Freudian going on there.
There is, but there's the thing of with the gun. It's not that he's got a big gun that they're shaming; it's that he doesn't use the right gun for the job.
Yeah.
And he's just picked the biggest gun. It's the same way now we sort of look at Texans with their big Ford F-150s with frigging flags on the end, and we go, we're compensating for something, dude.
Yeah.
Seriously, all you're doing is going to Walmart.
No,
you could have done that in a Ford Estate.
So no, I don't know if you've seen. I mean, you've seen the Western comedy from the 1980s, The Three Amigos. They almost do the opposite of this joke. When Martin Short has to do the old quick draw thing against the German guy, and the Mexican bandit says, "You don't want to die with a little sissy girl's gun like this. You want to die with a man's gun." It gives him this gun that he can barely hold on to. And when he actually wins the quick draw, he actually manages to draw this and shoot the guy. He goes flying back because his gun's too big for him to. The recoil on it just sends him flying.
Yeah.
I'm now just picturing the scene from Men in Black where Will Smith's character gets handed a tiny gun.
It is the same joke.
It's the same
exactly
joke.
That joke.
Oh,
it's the same joke.
Oh, and of course, Maddie is also carrying a massive gun.
That she doesn't even have a holster for, so she carries it in a pillowcase, and both times she fires it, she goes flying at least 3 foot in the air.
Yeah.
Like,
But-
someone please take the thing off her before she kills herself and give her like a stone and a slingshot.
Though I mean, it is important that she is carrying that gun because
Yeah,
that
because
was
it's her
her
father's
father's gun.
Yeah. And what I missed and what I would have liked to see in this film, although I think it would have been a bit out of character, is when they're out, maybe on the first night, once they've crossed the river, a scene where he teaches her how to shoot it properly. I would have liked to see something like that. Or even at the end when she's back on her homestead and he's there, maybe he could have ridden up to her, practicing shooting it, and then she takes him to the gravestone.
But you then on the other hand, you might get the idea that she may know a little bit about shooting already, because did sort of, I mean, the thing, because I know they sort of mocked her for it at first, but she said they went on a and this does not mean what people think it does. Just to be before, let me preface this:
a raccoon hunt,
a raccoon hunt, but it was not. Yeah, we'll say. Well, thank you, Ring. Actually, that's better. But that obviously, that's not what was said. So it does. That does not mean what people think it might mean if you watch this movie.
The word developed into a slur because of that slang. That slang predates the word being a slur. You're okay to use it in this specific context. Otherwise, 90% of westerns are all racist.
To be honest, actually, I think that it was good.
To be fair, they are.
This is Ring's channel. I'm glad they got in there. Actually, so you know,
like seeing as how this is the internet and people could easily clip. Make out of context clips. Perhaps it's best if we keep raccoon.
I may be in a friendly competition with Ring and Godless Sewing about who's going to get to get to a certain amount of subscribers first. But trying to get someone's channel taken down is Dirty Paul.
Yeah.
So,
you do kind of. There's a joke about certain artillery and weaponry where you sort of look at something and what a civilian would call a tank, we say that's not a tank, that's a self-propelled gun. And they are technically two different things. If just ask a military nerd, I'm sure Scummer can clarify the difference.
It's almost, to be honest, it's almost the old Crocodile Dundee joke, isn't it? If that's not a knife.
Yeah, you call that a knife, that's a knife.
Or, that's not a tank, that's an armored personnel carrier.
Yeah. So they all do mean different things, and the terms mean different things, but they also make a good joke out of it. And speaking of jokes, are we going to talk about how this film totally lampoons Texas?
Half the movie is just roasting LaBeef for being from Texas.
Yeah. Can I just say something about LaBeef? And this feels like the point at which to say it.
Yeah.
They had Glenn Campbell. First of all, they cast him as the second primary male in a film, which the only way you can cast Glenn Campbell as the second man in a Western is if John Wayne is the leading man. Can I just... Yeah.
Pretty much.
There's no one else you can cast before Glenn Campbell.
Except,
maybe Clint, maybe
Clint Eastwood,
but
then Glenn Campbell gets it on seniority anyway.
So it's like the only person you can book higher than Glenn Campbell is John motherfucking Wayne.
Yeah, exactly, and they had both of them, so that's how that goes.
Yeah,
they had Glenn Campbell. They stuck him on a horse. Fair, we know the dude can ride. That's how he started out. They then make him. He's quite clearly the pretty boy character. Yeah. If you've ever I'm getting to it, but they make him from Texas and take the piss out of him. Whereas actually, if you look at it, between him and John Wayne, he's probably the one who's got more right to be filmed on a horse.
Yeah.
Because he's actually worked with horses.
Awful nice words. Awful nice words for a horse killer.
But also, they make him this semi-educated, just educated enough to sound like a prick.
Yeah.
And in 2.5 hours, you have a 2.5 hour film, a gorgeous film, and you are telling me Glenn Campbell doesn't sing over your end credits. It's like they didn't know what they had with him. Okay, now, don't get me wrong, Glenn Campbell is... I know Glenn Campbell first and foremost as a musician, as a singer.
Yeah.
There's... my grandfather... There's a street in Bradford called Rhinestone Way. And my grandfather literally bought a house once on that street because of the song. Sold it later, like a few years later, but literally bought a house on the street because of the song. So I grew up hearing Glenn Campbell. So when I saw him in this, I've never seen a picture today before of Glenn Campbell. I had no clue what he looked like. I only knew him by that one song. And I will say he looks exactly as he sounds. He is the all-American white boy.
Yeah.
He really is. Like, you put him in a modern film and he's the jock with a heart of gold. That's his looks. That's what he looks like, and that's the character he's playing in this film.
Yeah.
I do like that it's the woman that brings him down a peg or two, and the verbal sparring is just hilarious in this film.
Yeah.
But I had to get that off my chest because you have Glenn Campbell, you don't give him any chance to do any riding tricks. You don't see him do any shooting tricks. I mean, even John Wayne spins his gun once.
Well, also,
and you don't let him sing. Like, what is he there for?
And of course, there's the the scene that this movie is famous for. The pretty good talk for a one-eyed fat man. He turns his horse, says, "Fill your hand, you son of a bitch," and rides down.
Yeah. And the thing is, it's almost like you couldn't let Glenn Campbell do anything he was good at because he would outshine John Wayne. I feel like that was the fear. So they had to kind of spend the whole film tearing him down. Because if they didn't, he would have become very quickly the leading man.
At the end of the day, John Wayne, like you said, if you're going to cast anyone in the West at this point, it was John Wayne, the fact as well that you're seeing in this this film, I think this works because you are seeing an older, more grizzled sort of John Wayne as well. I don't know, something about this, it just makes him that more believable than maybe some of his earlier roles to me. It just
he looks like a cowboy. He doesn't look like he's just showed up from New York to play the part.
Yeah, because I feel sometimes with some of his earlier roles or whatever, because he does essentially do the same character in a lot of his movies. Really, he's John Wayne. But it sort of suited him more. It's more of an old grizzled kind of guy who's been around a bit and seen the world, seen the West a bit and
John Wayne and Cowboys is like Ryan Reynolds and Deadpool.
Yeah.
He doesn't play cowboys. Cowboys play him.
I very nearly said that. I feel like anything played by Samuel L. Jackson or Ryan Reynolds, the characters play him.
Well, or like I said earlier, in most of John Wayne's movies, the role disappears into John Wayne. In True Grit, John Wayne disappears into the role.
Yeah, you forget you're watching John Wayne in this film, which is rare for a John Wayne film. But I think, again, that's another thing where this film is first and foremost character-driven.
Yeah.
The plot is largely irrelevant. The plot is there only to serve as a catalyst. It's a character-driven film. And that's rare for a Western as well. Like, a lot of Westerns are, guy rolls into town, finds a pretty girl gets hurt in some way, guy goes on revenge, guy gets revenge, watch a hanging, guy gets to go, guy rides off into the sunset, and that's a Western. and it doesn't really matter what you know, some of the bits might be knocked around in different order, but that's a Western. This is not that.
Yeah.
And I think the timing of this film matters, because this is quite a late film, isn't it, for the Western genre?
Yeah. Well, like I said, you know, it's usually perceived as the spaghetti era follows the classic era. True Grit, which we're covering as our classic Western, you know, was filmed after what we're covering as our spaghetti Western.
I have a theory, and I need to double check, but I'm pretty sure this was probably John Wayne's filmography. I'd be surprised if it didn't go True Grit, then Green Berets, which says it all. I think
this film was filmed after all of the what's called the Dollars trilogy. The real iconic spaghetti westerns with Clint Eastwood, Lee Van Cleef, and so on.
Yeah,
this film is. I suppose there's some people might make an argument that this was like the last hurrah for the great classic style western. I don't know, because I think there's been other westerns along similar veins after, but I think you definitely see a sort of change in the genre after this film, because you start seeing, you get the more Clint Eastwood type of westerns that are coming in. You get stuff like Butch and Sundance, which again is another total different take on the western genre. I can see why people make this argument of True Grit being like the great sort of last hurrah for the classic western.
Yeah, I will say as well with John Wayne, you would think he's one of those. I think a lot of modern people look at him and think, okay, so he's a Republican, he's vocally anti-communist, he's very white bread. John Wayne, for me, as a person, not as an actor, but as a person, is what the Republican Party ideals is, what they should have been. Like the guy enrolled on a cancer vaccine trial to try and cure cancer.
Yeah.
But then actually funded and tried to create the first Vietnam War propaganda movie.
Yeah.
Like he was very much, you know,
I'd say to be
country
fair,
flag.
Yeah.
God in that order.
I'd say to be fair that you also deal with, even if their politics were awful at times, you weren't dealing with the Republican Party hadn't necessarily gone batshit crazy like it has today. So
yeah, I will point out as well, in 1971, the guy's still supporting the Vietnam War.
Yeah.
He's still saying that black men have got no right to refuse the draft in 1971. And he's still... I'm not going to repeat the comment he made about the two lead characters in Midnight Cowboy, because it doesn't bear repeating. But what he called them... Yeah. He's not a great supporter of LGBT rights either. Let's put it that way.
I'm not making apologies to the guy at all.
No apologies for the guys at all. No, but
you can maybe he's a product of his time a little bit more. You could possibly say more with him than perhaps you can. Than perhaps you could say with somebody making those sort of comments today.
Yeah, but I think with John Wayne, when you talk about a salt of the earth, down to earth guy from that era, the person you're describing is John Wayne.
Yeah.
When you're talking about a family man from that era who, like I said, flag, family, and God, probably in that order. That those are his priorities, and that's the ideal Republican. Yeah. But it's the old school Republican who, despite completely disagreeing with them and, them very likely not liking my existence I can respect, because there was a level of, he's a pre-Reagan Republican.
Yeah.
That he's that kind of,
Also,
he's the idealized version of the rugged family man. And he actually lived that. He didn't pretend to be something he wasn't.
Yeah.
And that's why I think, again, same with, we were talking about the Southern men in the Civil War. There's a respect you can have for that kind of person who existed within their context.
Yeah.
You have to take them in their context, and you have to at least try to understand their point of view in order to get to that point.
So I was just reading the comments at first. Reading the comments at first. What do you make of GeoSam's comment there about is this movie promoting sort of capital punishment ideas and shoot first, ask questions later kind of mentality? What do you feel on that?
Put the question back up, please, Ring. I think it's important it stays up there.
It's not a question. This is just more Sam's. I'm just asking. I'm asking what people think. Is that?
Yeah,
people agree with that, or?
Yes, it's very gung ho. The girl, I think I messaged you, Ring, and I said, this girl, she doesn't want the best tracker for a marshal. She doesn't want the straightest marshal who always brings his arrest home alive. She wants Rooster.
The meanest.
The mean guy. This girl's not looking for justice. She's looking for revenge.
Yeah.
Now that's valid. If some fucker shoots my dad in the street and runs off with all his money, I'm going to hunt the fucker down. That's how that goes. He better pray the police get to him before I do. That's how that goes down. And I think anyone will say that about someone if they thought, if someone killed my dad, this is what I'd do. If you were being honest. If you were being honest, you'd say that.
I'd like to say I wouldn't, but I know realistically I would.
I'd like to say I'd be the bigger person, but...
So, I will say, and this is probably not, not going to be the last time these words come up this month. But in terms of the Turner thesis...
go on.
So...
before you go on, I have one question. Have you actually read it in its entirety?
No.
Right, go on.
But I haven't read it at all, so I'm going to be
in terms of the brief sketch, sketched out understanding I have of it.
Okay.
This film doesn't really promote capital punishment and vigilante tactics so much as it depicts them as a necessary evil that bit of the frontier is outgrowing.
It's slowly outgrowing.
Yeah.
Yeah, so the judge who orders the hangings is an older judge.
Yeah.
She's looking for the minority type of ranger who shoots first and asks questions later.
Yeah. Cogburn describes himself as a rat catcher who is falling out of favor now that the fancy lawyers have come to town.
Yeah. So this is very much, it's a film that's set in a particular period.
Yeah.
On that basis, I would say it's not promoting capital punishment as it is accepting that it's there.
Yeah.
And in a way, this is a theme that runs through a lot of Western movies, the sort of disappearance of the frontier. I mean, that's a theme that does pop up in a lot of Western movies.
Yeah, that's Turner's fault.
And that's definitely and that's an and obviously that's an that's an element of this.
And also while I say what Cogburn, Rooster Cogburn, while he does get his sympathetic moments, he's not really depicted as a sympathetic character. he's
it's weird for a film of the time, but he's an anti-hero.
Yeah, he is an anti-hero. So,
and he's one of those rare anti-heroes who, even in a modern context, would be an anti-hero.
Yeah,
which is even, in a weird way, is even a little weird for John Wayne in a certain way. Although he's always, he played some characters that were, take the law into their own hands. So there was always sort of you've got with a lot of his movies, you thought there was sort of like a very deep ethical sort of background with some of the characters he played. But this one, you get this feeling that there is just a tiny difference. I feel with Rooster.
Yeah, he's gone from being on the because there's when he talks about his past, there was a time when he was facing the noose, and he did a runner.
Yeah.
So he's almost, if you're gonna have an anti-hero in the Western genre, it's this character.
And, he's depicted, like, while he has his heroic moments, he is depicted largely as an old, broken down, fat drunk. Yeah. So I wouldn't really, and he is the shoot first, ask questions later character. So I wouldn't say the movie glorifies that attitude.
I would say as well, did anyone notice he is presented as the villain in this film? By there's one specific Western trope that presents him as the villain throughout this film.
Oh yeah.
He wears a black hat. Yeah, and even the guy, Pepper Pot, Ned Pepper, Ned Pepper, Robert Duvall, dresses in white.
Yeah, though Tom
and he's
Chaney,
supposed to be the big bad.
So,
though Tom Chaney also wears.
I'm not done.
Okay.
And John Wayne, deliberately and willingly, without ever questioning the man's decency, leaves Matthew with him.
Yeah.
Actually believes the man when he says he won't hurt her, and they make the deal.
Yeah.
And even to the point where he says he wouldn't kill someone for nothing. He's not that kind of a man, even though at this point he's quite clearly an outlaw.
Yeah.
John Wayne respects the man, and John Wayne knows there's a goodness in the man that is very rare in films, in Western films that follow the lawman. If a Western film is actually about an outlaw, the outlaw is going to have a heart of gold. But when you're following the lawman, generally the outlaw is the ultimate evil.
Yeah.
Not in this film.
I feel like just from a lot of the descriptions on it, it sounds like it's like a almost, I don't know if subtle is the correct word there, but it's almost like a commentary on the genre in certain ways.
It does feel like it. And it does feel it's very progressive for a Western. It's very progressive for its time. And I think the reason it got remade with very little changes regarding the plot, aside from the ending, which was in the remake, because I've Googled it and I know what the ending is in the remake, and really? But it's only a film that was that progressive in its time could possibly be remade after 2010 and stand up without too many plot changes and without too many changes. And I think that says a lot about the way the film was
clear,
written.
I have not seen the remake either. I've heard nothing but good things about it, honestly. But
in the remake, the Texan somehow survives.
Thanks, spoiler alert.
Yeah, spoiler alert. The Texan survives.
Yeah.
In the remake.
I didn't want you to spoil the end of this movie, and I got the remake as well. You know.
Is that one of the categories on the website that's like, does the dog die? Does the Texan die?
Who's checking that category? Aside from Texans, who is checking that category?
Yeah.
Sorry, Texas. I love.
no,
no, I don't. I love parts of you.
I will say, in another departure from the classic Western, True Grit is a very morbid film.
There's a lot of death.
Yeah.
and a lot of moralizing for a Western. Most Westerns are very straight up, shoot 'em up, bad guys versus good guys. Bad guys wear white, good guys wear... No, bad guys wear black, good guys wear white. Shoot 'em up, get out of town, hang the bad guy, hero gets to...
Can I ask a question then? It's just see what people think here. As we mentioned earlier, and obviously we could also start do it, but this was made after the Dollars trilogy, which obviously did change a lot, a number of things within the Western genre about the way the hero, or you get, again, you get a little bit more of an anti-hero in Clint's characters in that. Do you think that had an influence on the way this was made? On the way, like roots that that they were trying to make John Wayne just adapt a little bit to the kind of new thing that was coming in with Westerns. I don't know what people think on that.
I haven't seen the Fistfuls trilogy. Again, that's another one that I walked out of the room and went up to watch my cartoons. From what I hear of it, I imagine John Wayne to me has always struck me as the kind of character who tries to adapt to the situation he's in, at least professionally. He makes a Vietnam War film. His Westerns kind of... He's in Westerns at a time when America needs Westerns, and that's why the Western genre exists. He makes war films when they're relevant. He makes Westerns when they're relevant. So he's very on the ball professionally, even if not politically and personally, which we've already discussed. I cannot imagine John Wayne seeing the popularity of something like the Fistfuls, the Dollars trilogy. Yeah. Seeing what those characters were and not incorporating an understanding of that into his professional life.
And knowing that there's this young upstart called Clint Eastwood who's challenging for the throne, shall we say, as the king of the Western genre,
And it almost does feel like this film is a sit the fuck down, kiddo, it ain't your time yet.
Yeah.
That's what's going on here. I'm the big man in town, and this is my patch, and you might be... I can do what you did better. Well, that's what this film is saying to Clint Eastwood here.
And it is kind of... that. Well, which kind of, gives the little stunt at the ending a meta meeting.
It's the, come on then, let's see what you can do.
Yeah.
And I might be the old fat man in the genre, but are you really man enough to take the crown?
Yeah.
And it almost feels like that, like the whole film is talking about how John Wayne's character is an old fat drunk.
Yeah.
With a mind to the audience is aware that Clint Eastwood exists.
Yeah.
And it's almost very meta in that sense, and it's commenting on that. And I think it's a big man. It is a big man who can be in a film like that and play himself in a script like that. It's almost John Wayne. It's not just him challenging Clint Eastwood and saying, I can do what you did but better, and I'm still king. But it's also him saying, I can see my time coming now.
But,
I found... Someone's going to follow, but I need one. This is his one last
hurrah. It's like someone's coming up, but I'm not ready to. I'm not quite ready to pass the baton just yet.
Now I know, like what I said could have been a reference to "Fill your hand, you son of a bitch," but I was more referring to the very end of the film.
Yeah, the
jump. Like when Maddie hands him the pistol and he jumps the fence with his horse.
Yeah, again, it's a young man's game, but he's proving he's still got it. He's also, not only that, I think it's not just Clint Eastwood being challenged in that shot, it's Glenn Campbell.
Yeah.
John Wayne is saying, I'm still the big man in this genre with that. But he's doing it in such a way you kind of love him for it. It's to create an entirely hypothetical scenario. It's let's say, medieval history. It's the king and the prince in a contest of some sort, hunting or an archery contest, whatever it is. The prince does well. The king comes along and does better. It's as if he's turning to his son and saying, "You're good, but I'm still better for now.
Yeah,
It's yours, but you've got to wait because I'm not done yet."
It's kind of you will get the torch, but I am not ready to pass it to you.
Honestly, it feels sort of like what my dad did with teaching me chess. Like, don't get me wrong, you can play, but you've got to learn to beat me.
No, that's what my dad did the first time I got on a scooter.
And
my dad said to me, "Come back when you can ride a 600."
I'm going to have to respectfully disagree.
Given the what with us or with Sam?
With Sam.
Yeah, Sam. But I will let you say your piece first.
Because one, so yes, the hanging is shown as a big spectacle, which it was during the time. But the specific, I don't know if this is my external my own biases that I projected onto the piece while I was watching it. But the way it's filmed and the way the soundtrack jumps around with the singing of Amazing Grace makes it feel very unsettling and almost sinister.
Yeah, and I will say as well, when I saw that Amazing Grace was in this film, was in the titles of this film, I genuinely thought it was going to be a weepy with a sad ending, and that was going to be the final track.
Yeah.
So that kind of, I'm glad it didn't go that way. The whole thing with Amazing Grace is it is first and foremost a prayer. Does everyone know the backstory to Amazing Grace?
There's some to do with slavery, isn't there? A bit.
So, the backstory is Amazing Grace was written by a man who captained a slave ship. When he quit being a captain when he saw the horrors of slavery and became like a priest or something, or a caretaker at a church. I don't know exactly. Something to do with religion. And he became a very religious man. He wrote the song. He actually gave it to William Wilberforce.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know if anybody's
and he was part of. If you've ever seen the film Amazing Grace, he's the guy in the church with the
Guy Albert Finney. Finney played him. And again, that can be a topic for another day, possibly.
That's another film we have to discuss.
I also know there's one or two inaccuracies in that film, but hey ho, that's a topic for another day, I think.
But I think with this is first and foremost a revenge plot and a justice plot. Yeah. Depending on how you view justice and eye for eye. It's definitely an eye for an eye kind of justice. It's very Western justice. It's very frontier justice. But I can't say I disagree with it, and I absolutely categorically disagree with that statement, Sam. I'm getting there.
Yeah.
The reason I say that I don't think the death is glorified, the way she reacts to the hanging at the start, and yet she's still determined to see the guy hang. She doesn't want to kill Chena. She wants to see him hang. She wants justice. And I think it's more important to her that a judge tries him, so he's found guilty in court as well. That's why she doesn't want him taken to Texas.
Also,
I was going to say that became a big argument early on in this about because he was wanted in Texas and there was a big reward for him in Texas. Why you got the Texas Ranger there with them in the first place. But she wanted him tried. She wanted him tried in Arkansas. And it's like
there's a great.
I want him tried and tried and hung or whatever for killing my father. I don't want
not some random senator.
Not for some. That's more of a personal thing to her. And
I think Cheney is first and foremost a survivor in this film. He at all points he's just a survivor. Her father took him in because he was hungry and he worked for him. He got drunk, fucked up, he ran, and he fell in with people who then basically he used to survive. He fought back with The Rock and he attacked because he was trying to survive. I don't think he's robbed of his humanity.
Yeah.
I think we see a man, he's a bit of a worm. He repeatedly says, things happen to me. He's a man who doesn't feel like he's in control
the world
of his
is
own
against
destiny.
me.
Yeah. And we've all heard that excuse. I am made very uncomfortable by that comment that he makes and those comments that he makes, because especially knowing John Wayne's opinion on racial politics, it feels like he's parroting a lot of what white opinion was of why the civil rights movement was picking up.
Yeah. But other, like...
But he's never... I don't believe he's dehumanized at all. I completely accept that, you know, Sam, you have that opinion, you have a right to it, but I really don't feel like he's dehumanized, because for me, and I think this is something that happens with all the quote-unquote bad guys in this film, she makes sure Moon's money goes to his brother.
Yeah.
She has a respect for life, regardless of whose it is. But her respect for life only extends so far as other people respect their own life. And I think she's one of those people, she thinks that Cheeny's lost his right to that life because he killed her father, and same.
And
you know,
also
mood. It's just a mood. It is.
Yeah.
Also, like, very few of the on-screen deaths are pretty.
Oh yeah, no, they're not pretty at all. They're gross. There's blood. There's holes. There's even the hanging and the kick. Did you notice with the hanging? There was something I noticed. 3 of them hung. 2 of them went down and the legs stopped straight away, but the one closest to the camera carried on kicking for a good 2 or 3 seconds, and the camera stayed on his feet until they went still.
Yeah.
That was not supposed to be a pretty sign.
Also, Moon's death.
Moon's death as well.
It's a gruesome, ugly affair.
Yeah, it's long, it's drawn out, he's in pain.
Obviously I'm made deeply uncomfortable by that sort of death, but that sort of death, I think, does do a good artistic job of being like, this isn't a clean thing. No. And it isn't like a nice thing.
No one dies in this film without a hole in his shirt or blood on him. Like, it's as realistic as you can put it on screen at the time.
Yeah, we don't get the stereotypical shot of someone shooting a blank and then they
No, we don't get that. The deaths are very...
That's very rare for westerns at this time, and I think even in the Dollars trilogy that came before that, you know, which is, they were very sparing on like things like blood and stuff in them compared to this,
which is kind of funny because the reason audiences were going to the spaghetti westerns is that the spaghetti westerns being filmed in Italy were allowed to be a lot more violent and a lot bloodier than what Hollywood was putting out.
Yeah, and the spaghetti westerns they didn't have the baggage of the western. They were able to cut their own path. And their own path was very much showing the brutality of this kind of life. But I think all the deaths are very, very violent in this film. This film is very violent for a western, full stop.
And also, it doesn't shy away from showing us the dead bodies after they're dead.
That's another one as well.
Yeah.
Like, I was quite surprised at the scene at the start where she goes to see her father's body.
Yeah.
I will also just put it out there for anyone who's afraid of corpses. It can't hurt you. If you knew the person that loved you, they ain't going to hurt you. If you believe in that kind of thing, and afterlives, all the rest of it. Let's not get into religion, but there's the lines that are drawn between the men in this film are very specific, and the lines are not drawn along lawful and unlawful or honest and dishonest. They're drawn on how they treat Matty.
Yeah.
The men who treat Matty with something like respect, however grudging, and who treat her with a level of kindness, and I don't mean patronizing, I mean kindness, are the good guys. This is why Robert Duvall's character is, regardless of the fact that he's the outlaw in this movie, is a good guy.
Yeah.
And Tom Cheney isn't, because he threatens her with the snake pit. He killed her father. He's the bad guy of this film. And yet he gets less screen time than all the other outlaws. And there's a lot of talk about, you see the guys, but you don't see him.
Yeah.
And I think by the time she finds him, he's become an almost mythical figure to her. She's built him up in her head because she's heard these stories about the outlaws, but no mention of any man with a black mark. And even that, a black mark on his face, like, what does she call it? Like the mark of Cain?
Yeah.
That's what she's talking about. That's why she wants him hung. For her, it's justice for a murderer.
Yeah.
But she does respect other lives. And she's the moral heart of this film. So you will always view this film through her lens, because that's the point.
And, it's very much her...
deaths are vicious and violent, but necessary. And if they're not necessary, and that's why the dead are treated with respect, except the one that killed her father. Because you're not supposed to feel sympathy for him. You're supposed to want to see that fucker suffer and die.
Yeah.
That's the point.
And it's very much a coming-of-age movie.
Mm. She learns a lot.
Yeah.
But again, that line of she's earned her spurs.
Yeah.
She's proven she can keep up. That's the moment. That's the line in the film where they start treating, where the Texan starts treating her well. And then you get later on when she's arguing with John Wayne at the McAllisters.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's the moment where she stands up to him and she says, "No, I paid to be here and I ain't turning back now."
Yeah.
And he can't argue with her.
You see the thing, I mean, you think initially Rooster is the one who initially has a little bit more respect for her than LeBeef does,
Does he respect her or her money? I
probably
think
well,
yeah.
You could argue that, but it was like little things when that they jumped her and he and obviously we know that you could read into all the fetish connotations of that particular scene with the beef, and
he's enjoying it too much.
And Bruce was like, "You're enjoying this too much," and basically he's like, "Stop,"
I want to talk about that. I want to talk about that,
yeah.
the north-south divide between Arkansas and Texas. She says, in Arkansas, our men don't beat their women and children, she says. We don't ravage our horses with spurs.
Yeah.
And it's the Texan who beats her with the switch. And it's John Wayne's character who puts a gun to him and says, "Back the fuck off. Leave her alone."
Yeah, enough's enough.
Enough's enough. There is
yeah.
a line. And it's very... I think there's a commentary being made there on perhaps this Texas Marshal is probably fits better into the past than John Wayne's character does, who we see is adaptable.
Yeah.
Whereas the Texas Marshal never changes. He's the same character throughout. He has no character arc whatsoever. The same arrogant asshole in the hotel is the same guy at the end. Yes, he becomes friends.
Just a little bit colder.
Yeah. Whereas John Wayne starts out as this drunk, ne'er-do-well vigilante and ends as someone who you feel like she's had an influence on him and she's made him a better man.
Yeah.
But again, she doesn't change him into anything he wasn't before. She just brings that to the surface.
Yeah.
And Mattie as a character brings out the best in everyone around her.
She isn't. It's not the sort of stereotypical trope of the girl sort of domesticating the wild man here kind of thing.
Yeah,
You
which
know,
is why I'm
it's
so
not-
glad it didn't turn into a romance.
Yeah.
Can you imagine if she'd have ended up with either
Oh,
of them?
this
The
wouldn't- this
paedophilia
wouldn't work.
aside, like, because she's
yeah.
like 14, but
yeah, even let's just say that she's a girl in her, I don't know, early 20s or something. This still, if it had been the whole thing of her like sort of warming the heart and domesticating the, you know, the sort of rugged cowboy, this movie would not have worked because it's just been any old. It would have been any old. It might have just made this movie any throwaway old western that we probably wouldn't be talking about today.
I mean, because the Texas Marshal is that little bit younger and he's that fresh face, he's Glenn Campbell, you can almost see an alternate universe ending where they go back there to maybe find his body to give him a proper burial and find him alive, and she nurses him to health and they get together when she's older. I can see that as an alternate universe, but I think it would have cheapened the strength of Mattie's character, but also the strength of the plot of this if that had happened. Because the whole point is Westerns like to fall back on romantic love as a cheap shortcut to making the man halfway decent. And like to make women that and it's nice to see that she could save him from himself without having to lay back and think of England. Let's put it that way.
It entertains me the amount of times that I've seen the trope of like woman fixes man from problem that requires therapy and medication.
Yeah. She fixes him with the power of a flirty smile, a fan like this, a pretty dress, and a wedding night.
Despite the fact that most of the time he would genuinely need meds to deal with some of the issues.
Funnily enough, like up until she says that, I can't remember if she and the lady, at the first place they stopped at were Presbyterians, or if LaBeef was the Presbyterian.
No, he was Episcopalian.
Yeah.
He was raised Episcopalian. She was, I think what was it she said? Lutheran, but are you Cumberland or Sutherland or something?
She said she was Presbyterian, but it was
Presbyterian.
like Southern or... so there were two sorts of...
And the woman says Southern, and she says, my family's Cumberland and proud of it.
Yeah, but...
And there is this whole religious undertone to this film.
Like, up until then, I like, up until that scene, I had pegged her as Mormon.
I
do like the little line that was said to LaBeef about that when he said about his religion or whatever.
Yeah.
I always took you for a kneeler.
Yeah. I thought that was brilliant.
Great line.
Now here's the main reason why. So Cogburn offers her coffee.
And she says no,
Yeah. That's the main reason why.
But the thing is, it makes you wonder as well what her history is, because she's afraid of alcohol.
Yeah.
She's well afraid of alcohol in this film. And it's not because Cheney was drunk when he killed her father. She's afraid of drink. Whenever she sees them drinking, she tries to distract them and stop them.
Yeah, she is well, actually, I think being teetotal was a Presbyterian thing.
Yeah.
Listen, most Christians... Listen, in America, in that time, if you were Christian, you were descended from Puritans. If you were white, ergo, you didn't like alcohol.
Just say, temperance
it-
would have been a big thing.
Temperance movement. Let's say this is based in sort of the 1870s, 1880s at a push.
Yeah, you look at the early days dawn of temperance movement, possibly at that point.
Yeah, we're talking post-Reconstruction, pre-World War One. We're talking that era. It's going to be post-Reconstruction because there's a guy working in the courthouse who's black. So it's got to be post-Reconstruction. It's also got to be it's got to be pre-World War One and post-Civil War. So that's bang in there for the temperance movement. And even the hotel she stays in, you know, it's kind of a later film. It's got to be pre-1890s because that's the Turner thesis.
It's got to be, to be honest, it's got to be
in that tiny little slot.
Let's be generous here. Just be generous with the timeline here. It's got to be anywhere between 1870 and 1890, and that's being very generous, I suppose, giving it a good 20 years. That's being
generous with Reconstruction.
That's going to be the. That's if I was to give it as wide of a period as possible. That would be it's got to be somewhere between them. Realistically, this was
the fact that it's urban, and the fact that there are there's only one black character in this film, and we only see him once, and he only says like 2 lines, if that. He's a throwaway character. But the fact that they're still talking about the war, so it's still in living memory. I mean, and they're still young enough to be going out and doing this. I'd say 1880s.
Given the age of the beef as well, I'm more tending towards 1870s.
Late 70s, early 80s, I would have put it at.
Yeah.
Because again, Turner is at 1890, and the census Turner bases thesis on that the frontier is closed is the 1890 census. So that's the 1890 is the first time in American history where there is no clear line running north to south in the area that would become the United States, because at this point it's really not.
Yeah.
Where you can say, okay, that's the frontier and that's quote unquote civilization. There's, that's where the saloons and everything starts, and the West as we see it on film starts. This is close. Her father carries gold coins from California, so California is and he just carries those coins for luck. So that it's after the California gold rush has been and gone. So all that in mind, late 70s, early 80s for this film. I would say more early 80s, given that we have a black character in the courthouse as someone who works there and actually has a paid job there.
And also, the Presbyterians were a big push behind the temperance movement. So we could argue her hatred of alcohol was a
religious thing.
Because her father seemed to have a similar attitude when he's pulling when he's pulling Cheney out of the saloon.
And it's that era of, because I mean by the 1890s, Turner is worried that without the safety valve of the American frontier, where all the people who are civilized go to try and build a life, without that being there, and with it all now civilized, where are those kind of people going to live? And that's the question that's asked in this film of where is the space in the era where there is no longer a frontier for characters like Brewster? And there isn't one. Except for the people he meets along the way and the good people he meets who bring the good out in him and give him somewhere to give him a final resting place.
Which is why you get, again, historically, we had a lot of people who went to, say, places in South America at the time. It's the new frontier kind of thing. And Hence,
Mexico
again,
became
another, yeah, another again, which can lead in another classic Western, Butch and Sundance. They end up in South America.
Do they end
You know?
up in Argentina?
Historically, Butch
In the
Cassidy and
film.
Sundance Kids in the film they go straight to Bolivia, which is where they die. In reality, they went to Argentina first. Then and it even looks like they tried to go straight for a little while. Didn't work out. They ended up going to Bolivia, which is where they were killed.
Yeah, no, that is. You know more about Butch and Sundance than I do. I haven't even seen the film. Again, it's another one I walked out on.
Yeah. It's a great movie. It is a great movie. Give it another chance.
I keep meaning to watch it, but then every time I sit down to watch it, I think Jeremy Clarkson likes this film.
Well,
I know.
remember,
Ignore that.
remember.
Hey, Noodle, you watched Top Gear. Knock it off. You can't.
Yes, that's why I know exactly what Jeremy Clarkson's like, and I know the kind of film he would like.
Though here's the thing, Butch and Sundance is a satire. Clarkson probably likes it straight.
Yeah, you do get the impression he likes it straight. To be fair, though, Clarkson liked Rush, and I've watched Rush recently, and that was a good film.
Yeah.
So, yeah, I'll give it a shot at some point. I'll have an excuse to watch. Are we watching it this month at some point? Are we doing Butch and Sundance?
No. It was vetoed because you didn't want to watch it.
Well, I'll find time to watch it at some point.
I pushed for it, but you vetoed it, and
damn it.
Whenever we revisit.
Yeah,
Western.
we're doing True Grit instead of Butch and Sundance.
Right. Okay. We'll do True Grit next. We'll do Butch and Sundance next year when we come to Westerns again.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. By the way, I'm going to remember. Somebody clip that. I'm going to remember that. Okay.
You can. I tell you what. I will even tweet it for you.
I'm gonna.
You can hold me to that. That's fine. You can hold me to it. Mainly because I actually do trust your guys' recommendations for films. So if you say it's a good film, Scummer, I'm willing to give it a shot. But yeah, this film, we were talking about religion and the way it permeates this film.
Yes.
And yet, it's one of those rare westerns where you never see a church and you never see a cross.
Yeah. Even the two. There's a couple in the cemetery.
Okay, there's a cross on the headstone in the cemetery, but you never see it as a. You never see anyone praying in this film.
Yeah. There's the only crosses are unnamed grave markers.
Yeah.
Generally, though, the purpose that a church serves in a Western movie is that there's usually someone on top of the roof with a Winchester rifle. At some point.
Or there's going to be a Mexican standoff by one of the graves. That's what a church is for in a Western.
Yeah.
Including in Shanghai Noon. That's what the church is for.
One of the greatest Westerns of all time.
Yeah, definitely. Which brings up another point that we'll get to momentarily, I expect. But this film is very... This film, to me, feels a lot more modern than it is.
Yeah.
I could happily see this film being part of the revival of Westerns that came in the early 2000s. Also, for the record, folks, and I will say this, you always know when America is at war and needs a morale boost because you start seeing Westerns come out. That's how that works. It is literally, that is something that anyone who studied the American West will tell you that's how that works. Because the whole frontiers and survivors and we can make it and we're, civilizing the savage areas. Those ideas come through when America needs them.
Though arguably, and we will definitely get onto this in a few weeks when we close out this month. Arguably, that spot's being taken by another genre, so we may not see more, or as much more.
That depends on whether you agree with Gene Roddenberry.
See, I
Because if space is the final frontier,
yeah,
it gets a bit iffy.
I don't necessarily see westerns are always being made. I'd say there's more of a certain type of western, more like the classic western that comes out when America needs its morale boost. In a lot of others, I mean, some of the great westerns that have come out have been in, should we say, like post-war era. So, like one of the greatest westerns of all time, when westerns really weren't a thing. This is in the mid to late 1970s. Was the Outlaw Josie Wales with Clint Eastwood, which is one of the greatest westerns ever made. You can kind of go into so. And you could possibly go into, say, like mid '90s. You had stuff like The Unforgiven, Tombstone.
Yes, but those films spoke to different things. They were speaking to the politics of the civil rights movement and other things. Westerns always speak to the politics of the America they're released into.
Yeah. That's very much.
When I say you see westerns when America goes to war, when you start seeing westerns on at the cinema. And when you start seeing them advertised big and getting massive funding and big budgets, check America's politics. They will be at war with someone. I promise you. They will be at war with someone.
Though it seems like...
And they'll probably be losing, even though they don't want to admit it.
Yeah, though it seems like the spurs are being replaced by spandex.
Yes, but I think that's because there's the mentality of in the modern era of technology, we no longer identify with the West as the frontier and we identify with outer space as the frontier. So the superhero movie is a natural progression.
So when are we talking Toy Story again?
That's literally the entire theme of the Toy Story.
If you look at say some modern science, sci-fi, and superhero movies. I mean, obviously, like the Han Solo film that was done for Star Wars, that was a western. Absolutely western.
Oh,
I'm sorry, the Star Wars is a western.
Yeah.
What are you on about? Star Wars is just a western.
It's a space western.
It's a western.
Yeah, I wouldn't go with the original. I think the original, I'd say, is more of a classic fantasy kind. But what's the last one of the last X-Men film they did? Logan. That is a classic western. And that gave me vibes of films like Shane and stuff like that.
Yeah, there's a reason we're watching it in 2 weeks' time.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But yeah, I want to talk about the hot button topic, the not trigger warning, but content warning topic, race in this film and in westerns in general.
Yeah.
Let's talk about the Chinese character, then we'll come to the Indian character. And I've already touched on and said everything I want to say about the black character and what he represents.
Though, arguably, there's another. I don't know. It seems like the ranch foreman that goes with Maddie is coded as at least mixed.
Yeah, he's mixed coded. I think as well, actually, Tom Cheney, if you look at him, he's dressed and he looks more like, I don't want to say a Mexican, but a Mexican.
Yeah.
If I looked at him and hadn't seen any of the film, just saw a still of the film with him in it, I'd have said, yeah, that guy's Mexican.
Oh, and then, of course, there's, Mexican Bob.
Yeah. Again. But let's talk about the Chinese character, because I know you'll have a lot to say on this because you will have been raised with the Lewis and Clark story.
Yeah.
And that era. And this is smack in the middle of the railroad as well, isn't it? It's probably the tail end of the railroad construction.
Yeah, and of course most of the railroad construction was down in the South.
And there's I kind of feel for this character.
Yeah.
Because he's... Do you know what he is? He he reminds me of... There was a trope of... If I say the black mama in the kitchen...
Yeah.
In all the films, there's always a big black woman who cooks and demands everyone eats and puts way too much food on your plate and is generally that character. She's the maid. He's kind of that character to John Wayne in this film.
Yeah.
But he's also got... He has his little moments of victory. He wins at cards.
No shooting guns.
Yeah. And he is almost... I don't want to say female coded because he's not coded. He's not meant to be feminine. But there is a undercurrent of feminizing him, and I think that's a lot to do with his race.
Yeah. And also...
It's interesting to see that John Wayne's character treats him about as well as you would expect someone to treat him in the film.
Yeah.
I don't say he treats him as an equal because he fucking well doesn't. Treats him like a manservant. But there is an affection there between them.
Yeah.
And I do like that this is my father and that's my nephew, the cat named after a general.
Yeah.
And that's his own little family.
Yeah.
It does say a lot about Rooster that he fits in with the misfits.
Yeah.
And again, this is more commentary on where does Rooster belong in the post, once the frontier is closed.
I've never seen someone eat with chopsticks before better than dirty fingers.
Exactly.
And,
and John Wayne's there sloppily.
Which of course Maddie also gets because she's always going on about germs.
Exactly.
I just even think the sort of visual of like Rooster Cogburn cuddling a cat is kind of yeah.
He is weirdly emotionally vulnerable for a cowboy in a western.
Yeah.
Is Rooster. And it is put down. There was an attitude during the temperance movement that, drink made men feminine and drink undercut a man's masculinity.
Yeah.
And there's an argument for that. There is an argument to say that, when you've got a drink in you, you're not the best person, the best version of yourself. Whether the best version of yourself is the most masculine version of yourself is two different things.
Let's be honest. You got a lot of guys, haven't you, who will only hug each other and tell them they love each other when they're drunk.
Yeah.
Yeah, but they're the good ones.
But, anyways,
anyway, as I was saying,
cheers.
So,
I'll give you a hug later, scummer.
But in regards to this character, it's kind of like I'm not gonna say if it's telling in a good way or telling in a bad way, but it is kind of telling that he's only shown in association with Rooster Cogburn as they're both depicted as something of relics of a bygone era.
I'm gonna say this, and you're not gonna like it. And anyone who likes westerns and thinks they're all about manly men isn't gonna like it. But tough, because it's the truth. Westerns are incredibly homoerotic.
They are. There is nothing quite as gay as a cowboy.
Yeah, there's nothing as gay as a cowboy, and I will put it out there, and I will say, Rooster and this Chinese fella, Mr. Lee, that's an ersatz homosexual relationship. Lee basically plays the role of John Wayne's wife. If you look at him, he cooks for him, he cleans for him, he keeps house for him, he puts him to bed when he's drunk. He makes sure there's coffee in the morning when he wakes up. He's basically his wife.
Yeah, and yet people were really surprised when Brokeback Mountain came out. It's really weird.
Yes.
All Brokeback Mountain did was take out the subtext and put it on the billboard.
They just like, hey, we're putting it on full display now.
Listen, guys are out there. It's rough, it's tumble, and there's no women about, and this big. How do I put this? Human beings have needs. Yeah. Human beings require intimacy to survive. When there's no women about, men are going to start looking at each other and they're going to start feeling a little bit friendly.
Yeah.
This shit happens. There is
all the sailors.
Yeah,
all the
prisons as well.
Yeah, sailors, cowboys. Well, yeah. There is a recorded phenomena of the quote-unquote gay prisoner. And that is because in an all-male prison there ain't many women about. The clue.
Well, just like
there was a good line in it's a prison comedy that Adam Sandler remake of The Longest Yard.
Yeah. Where and if you want to see how that's turned toxic.
very, very gay stereotypes who are very feminine, but Chris Rock saying to him, hey, look, in 6 months' time for you, they're going to look like Beyonce.
Exactly. And if you want to see how that stereotype is turned toxic and is turned vicious, and you see the predatory gay in prisons, go watch Shawshank Redemption.
Yes.
I mean, people say that.
By the way, movie we need to cover on this sometime.
Yes, definitely.
The whole being manly and being gay thing is just like gestures vaguely in Cowboys and Pirates and Spartans.
And prisoners and sailors and Romans and Greeks and
well, even like the Norse.
Look, if you put two men on a horse, all that bouncing around all day is gonna make them itchy.
Okay.
You've got to be blunt about these things sometimes, and
Quick side note: if anybody ever saw the film Meet the Spartans, which was a spoof of 300, where they just went there with like the gay thing as a joke. Ironically, I don't even know if they realized. I don't know if they even realized how close to history they actually got with the Spartans with all the jokes.
That was probably more historically accurate than 300.
300, yeah.
But okay, though, I would. So I'm gonna be evil right here. So, perhaps there was a romance, but it was LaBeef and Cogburn.
Oh.
I think what happens under the stars when your bed rolls out and the girl is sleeping a little way away to protect her decency stays. What happens at night stays at night,
But anyways, anything else to say about Chen-Li?
Chen-Li as a character, again, he's a walking stereotype. He is. You look at his shop, the way he dresses, every aspect of him is a walking stereotype.
Yeah.
He's feminized in that role as the pseudo wife to John Wayne's character, who basically keeps him from drowning in a bottle.
Yeah. I need to duck out, so see you guys in a bit, I guess.
Yeah. Catch you later, Sam.
See you, Sam.
And there's not a lot more else to say about him because we don't see enough of him. There's the thing there of he is cleverer. He's an intelligent man.
Yeah.
He can beat John Wayne at cards. He doesn't get his hands dirty cooking. He's, and there's a kind of
he makes
the softness of John Wayne that existed before Matty appeared, because the cat's kind of useless. You get the impression the cat's his more than it is John Wayne's. And he took the cat in, even though the cat can't catch the rat.
And he makes the corn dodgers.
Yeah, he makes the corn dodgers, and the line of everyone. It's kind of a stereotype of this is why I say that's where I got the big black woman trope from.
Yeah,
you know, and it is a stereotype that exists. I know it exists in the Indian culture that I grew up in. The women feed you until you burst. The standing joke with my mum was, "You don't leave her house hungry." And Ring will tell you, my mum used to pipe. My mum introduced herself with, "This is who I am. You hungry? Are you a big eater?" And even if you said you weren't a big eater, you still got a plate that was piled up 2 foot high.
Yeah, I mean, and even up into like modern films that have, even up into modern films that stereo, and even with a film that is like an anti-racism film, like the Help, the character Minnie in, if you've ever seen The Help, is still kind of the big black woman cook, you know, the big, you know. I know they, she's the mother, big, but I will say in that movie, which again we can table for another day, they do kind of turn that on her head a little bit because she's kind of that character but fights back as well. So
yeah, the thing is as well, there is a cultural pride of being a black woman and feeding your family and being a good cook. Like, even though I was raised to change car tires and, you know, I had to learn how to cook rice, and anyhow I couldn't.
Yeah.
You know, there were certain things I had to learn. You learn how to cook, clean, and iron, but I was raised into it in the more modern sense of you have to know how to look after yourself. My mum was definitely raised into it as what man, you know, there's a great line in a film called Bend It Like Beckham. The girl wants to play football, and her mother looks at her and says, "What kind of family wants a daughter-in-law who can run around kicking football all day but can't make round chapati?" And that's the attitude. I laugh at that so hard because it's true. Line for line, I heard that, and the mother's represented as being very old-fashioned. But I heard things like that growing up. What kind of family wants a daughter-in-law who can't cook? What kind of man wants a woman who he comes home to when she gives him a sandwich?
One who knows how to make a hell of a ham.
Yeah, hence who I married. You know, but it is very much that's the attitude. That's what the girls are raised in, and there's a pride in it. So it's very interesting for me to see a man in that role. And I think the only reason they get away with it is because he's not white and he's not American.
I'll tell you a little story then from my childhood, and I think this was almost during one of the kind of so say sex stroke relationship educations we had, and somebody like, and it was sort of like, what do you look for in a partner? And someone in my class actually put, obviously as a joke, got to be a good cook. And this is obviously one of the boys, like, you know, women should be in the kitchen kind of thing.
Yeah.
And then when this female teacher, said, "That's a very, very valid argument." She says, "I'm with my husband. He's a fantastic cook. He cooks for me." And you can just see the look, because I knew who wrote this.
Yeah.
Who wrote this, thinking he was basically going to trigger the female teacher and every girl in the class with that comment. Just looking so crestfallen at this point.
Thing is,
it's like,
I went to an all-girls school, and one of the things that the attitude was, you have to learn how to sew, you have to learn how to cook, you have to learn how to iron, you have to learn how to clean, you have to learn. You know, we had woodwork as an option, but maybe 4 girls took it to GCSE every year.
Yeah, I think it's not.
Like, also,
I was the odd one out for knowing how to change a car tire at 16.
I mean, my mum will tell you that, like, basically her best like things in school were, one, it was English, the others were textiles and home ec. It was home ec. Actually, it was just called sewing and cooking back then. It wasn't even textiles and home economics at that point, you know.
I'll tell you a story that my dad tells a lot, so he probably won't mind it. When he was 15. Him and his 3 mates, the gang of 4 at their school, you know, troublemakers, because, of course, that's where I came from, because what else do you expect of the man who raised me?
No, never.
Never. They decided, in their wisdom, that they were all going to drop metalwork and engineering, and they were going to take home ec for a term because that's where the girls were. So they all filled in the timetables, and their head teacher came to find them. And this is how my dad tells it. Pulls my dad and calls my dad by his last name, which I'm not going to repeat because privacy, etc., etc. But Mr. Noodle, Mr. Noodle, you must be the ringleader of this one. What are you doing? And my dad stands there, bold as brass, and says, "But we're all doing engineering, and we're probably not going to get married till we're 30. So I want to know how to sew a button and iron and cook and everything else. And we fancied a change. Anyway, we've done metal work for like 3 years now. We fancied a change." And the head teacher looked at him and said, "Right, well, you've had your change. Now I'm changing you back." Because it was, boys didn't do those things.
Okay.
Boys learned metal work and girls did home ec.
One more little thing before we get back to the topic, I suppose. Comedian Steve Hughes did a good routine about this. And he's an Aussie comedian. He said that he was taking home economics while all the other boys in his school were doing rugby league. And they'd be like saying to him, You're cooking, Hughes? What's wrong with you? You're fucking gay, Hughes. You're fucking gay. And he says, okay, I'm in a classroom making cakes with 30 girls. You fuckwits are showering naked together.
Exactly.
But
and I think that's what my dad cottoned on to as a teenager, and what his teacher cottoned on to as well.
Yeah. So also, that being said, Maddie is rather masculinely coded in this film.
Can I?
Yeah.
You use this term a lot, and I need to clarify something, Rain. I love you. You're using the term coded incorrectly.
Okay, depicted.
Yeah.
That'd be a better way
we'll talk about it after the show, and I'll explain to you the differences. But coded is a very specific thing. Yeah. Coding is a specific thing.
This is what I noticed. And again, that was more of an evolution of her character as this went on as well, of being the kind of young girl from a quite...
No, because
you think sheltered
she
background.
starts out doing a dad's books and telling him what to do.
Yeah, but you can't. You just see us just going along, like saying, "Hey, I can hang with the boys here."
Yeah, because she's been raised to do it.
Yeah,
This is why I like Matty, and I have a lot in common with Matty. I was the young girl I wasn't playing with dolls. I was playing with spanners and screwdrivers.
Mm.
That's the equivalent to what Matty was raised as. Her father didn't raise her to be a pretty girl in petticoats. Her father took her raccoon hunting, taught her how to do maths, which is just unusual for the time. She's educated. She, at 14, is telling her dad how to spend his money.
And she has a reputation for it on the ranch because Tom Chaney says, found any pennies to pinch when they run into each other.
Yeah. And so her dad's raised her with this frontier attitude. And this is a thing that was very common in the frontier, but strikes us as odd for the time. Women going toe-to-toe with the men. Well, if your men are all out, rustling cattle and working the fields and, and everything else, the women have got to run the businesses. The women have got to... There's a reason, that there's a stereotype of the loose woman on the frontier, because the women had a lot of independence.
Also,
but it's like any time when, shall we say, in history where, the traditional, shall we say, sex and gender roles require something a bit different, whether it be on the frontier or whether it be during the First and Second World War. The men were away, and they go. The women are the one, and it's the women who step up to the plate to keep to keep things going.
I don't want to derail it, so just think about it. But here's an interesting sort of counter-historical question for you. Do you think women would have got the vote in England when they did, if not for the Second World War?
I would say no, because they got the vote before the Second World War.
Well, no, but I'm talking about universal suffrage, not
sorry,
white landowning suffrage.
I was just being facetious there.
Now,
they got the vote officially in 1917, but really 1926, you'd say, in Britain was the real.
So if not for the First World War and then the Second World War, would the feminist movement have gone the same way?
Difficult to say. This is just me. This is difficult to say. I think the First World War helped in a lot of ways, but there had already also been other countries where before Britain established votes for women. So. That could be. We'll table that for another day.
We'll table that for another day, but think on it, and just think on the fact that a lot of the suffragette arguments were, we kept your jobs going during the First World War, we created the munitions you were firing, we deserve the vote. That was the suffragette argument.
I think this is best tabled for. I think this is best tabled for another day. Actually,
actually, I have one. I have one added point to this discussion, and I'll phrase it in a form of a question.
You have more of a comment than a question, is that it?
Well, it's a Jeopardy comment that's
an academic joke, don't worry about it.
In other words, you're about to toss in a hand grenade here.
Yeah.
So, which state was it that had the first female representative?
Montana.
Yep.
Montana.
There's a reason the first states to have women in Congress were Western states.
Yes, and it's the same reason women got the vote after the First World War, and then later feminism moved. Because women have to prove themselves to men before men will give us half a chance.
I will point out, Ring, this is not the first time you've asked me this question.
Yeah.
Well, so
like I said, it was a comment made in the form of a question.
Yeah.
Yeah. So even things like equal pay, equal rights, women have to prove ourselves capable of doing what men can do before we're given those, even though we should have them. And this is the whole point with Mattie. She has to prove herself capable of keeping up with the men throughout this film.
Yeah.
And the thing is, she doesn't just have to prove herself capable of keeping up with them. She has to be better than them to be considered their equal. They took the ferry. She waded the river. You know, she had to prove herself cleverer than the man who was selling the horses in order for him to treat her as a decent customer. Yeah. She had to prove herself as capable, but not just capable, as better than the men around her for them to respect her.
Yeah.
Because they couldn't look at her and say, yeah, she's as good as us. She has to be better than us to be viewed on an equal footing.
Yeah.
And that's a really, really interesting thing for a film from 1969 to do.
Yeah.
Because that's something that's not been acknowledged, even in feminist discourse, until the 80s.
Yeah.
And it's almost... I can't decide whether it's a symptom of that or whether it's commenting on it. Probably it's more a symptom, but it can be read as commenting on it.
Or my favorite answer, both.
Both is good. You fight like my sister. I've met your sister. That's a compliment.
Yeah. And we will be getting to that movie as well.
And again, that commentary of the woman has to be better than the men to be viewed as, to be respected.
Yeah.
And Mattie does go well above and beyond and prove herself more than capable.
Yeah, and again, it is that kind of thing that in those situations where essentially, the gender roles have to be thrown out in those situations or whatever. But then when you get, sadly, sometimes when the frontier is tamed or the war is over, you go back to. Sometimes, sadly, it takes a step back and goes back to.
And it's
2 steps forward, 1 step back. Yeah, that's how it goes.
It's also telling. It's also telling that Rooster, the old fat throwback to a wilder time, is the one who accepts Maddie first.
Yes.
Because he recognizes her on merit.
Yeah.
But she still has to do better than him in order to be considered that. Which brings us on to the other minority character in this film.
Yeah.
Who has to prove himself. He's a hairdresser. But that line that's passed, you're really going to let him walk behind you with a sharp implement, is very... The back and forth between him and John Wayne there is very interesting, because he meets John Wayne on his own footing.
Yeah.
He doesn't ever argue the stereotype John Wayne presents.
Yeah.
And that's something this film is, sadly, where this film falls down. It never gives the impression that John Wayne might, because he knows this one native character who's decent, or he knows this one woman who's competent, that he's going to treat any others he meets the same way. That he's going to learn from that. He takes these people as individuals, and it's that rugged individualism of the frontier and the American mentality coming through there. It's also just good old-fashioned bigotry.
Yeah.
There's got to be an exception to every rule. But that character, even though he's only on screen for a very short time, is very interesting. John Wayne clearly respects him. Rooster clearly respects him, but still has that, and he's got that level of banter that was acceptable in the 90s if you were the token minority in a white group. And I grew up with that, and I have fond memories of those people, and I'm still, close with a lot of those people. And I think for its time, the film was as progressive as it could be in that regard.
Yeah.
And the character of Rooster was as progressive as he could be in that regard.
Yeah.
Because he was willing to stay outright the undertones that films like this carry. And the line, I really don't want to repeat it, but I'm kind of going to have to, where he says, he steps behind and he says, the guy passes the comment of, something like, and again, please don't crop this and use it against me later. The comment of, not all Indians want your scalp, and he responds with, yeah, but there are Indian scalps on Indian belts.
Well, no, the peace officer says, I'm Indian too.
Yeah. And then he says, but there are Indian scalps on Indian belts. And that's a very... I can see why it was funny at the time.
Yeah.
I can see why it would have been funny right up until about 2005.
Yeah.
And I can see why there's a bit of humour in it as a minority even now.
Yeah.
Because what that is hinting at is a lot of baggage about race traitors. And the whole thing it's the same attitude. And again, don't crop this and come at me. Please don't. It's the same attitude that makes black people call people like me who are mixed, but also are very raised in white culture, coconuts. It's that same attitude.
Yeah.
And that's the attitude this character has, which I don't like.
Well, I think
he's kind of assimilated. And it's a really bad thing to be discussing, particularly in the current climate.
Again, I think it's like with in like this sort of genre as well. You do sort of see where you went from the sort of Western area where it was literally cowboys and Indians, and the cowboys were the good and Indians, were the bad guys kind of thing. And then you get to I suppose it evolves to a little bit where you've got the Indians they're kind of okay, but it's the whole quote unquote, I hate this term, please don't come at me, I hate this term, but it's the quote unquote noble savage kind of thing.
I hate that trope.
Yeah, it's the Uncle Tom, isn't it?
Yeah.
Uncle Tom is the sort of the same stereotype as the coconut, which is what I was going on. It's the black man who thinks he's white or thinks he's white. I hate it. I feel dirty even talking about it.
I felt dirty even saying that term, but that quote unquote.
But that's who this character is in this film.
A heads up for Lit Month. For all the things that I enjoy about it, and for all the things that Around the World in 80 Days does well.
What it doesn't do well is the racial stereotypes.
It's a Victorian comedic travelogue.
Put it this way.
Yeah.
Put it this way. There's only one person of Far Eastern origin who could play that part and have it still be funny in the modern day on film, and it's Jackie Chan.
Well, no. Well, actually, Passepartout is French.
Yes, but in the film, it's Jackie Chan.
Yeah, but
and there's a reason for that.
Yeah, but no, it's like there's a reason that Europe entirely gets skipped over, and the casual Victorian racism is rife, especially when they're in India.
Yeah, look at those weirdos. Basically, they're not like us. It's the us versus them mentality.
And there is a problematic scene while they're crossing America on the train.
Wait, a Victorian novel and there's only one problematic scene?
No. No, like I said, basically the India stretch, and there's only one problematic scene in America.
Yeah. That reminds me, I want to do Houseboat on the River Styx at some point.
Yeah. But that being said, back to
Yeah. So this character is presented as an exception.
Yeah.
This entire film is also late enough in the history of America that, and again, I hold my nose as I say this, don't come at me, the natives are no longer a threat. Yeah. He's toothless.
Yeah.
In the worst possible way. He's being assimilated and made. He's Uncle Tom.
Yeah. They're the two characters, one's a peace officer, the other is the barber surgeon.
And they're both working for and towards the benefit of white people.
Yeah.
This is the one part of this film that is not as progressive as the rest of it.
Yeah.
And yet, in its own way, it's still more progressive than most other westerns in that they get speaking parts. They're positive, in quotes, representations of those races insofar as they are not the enemy. But it's very convoluted and it's very complex the way they're presented.
Yeah.
And it's not a positive representation overall by our standards. But we're looking at, we're talking about a 50-year-old film, so cut some slack.
We are.
I know 50-year-old men who aren't as progressive as this film. So
yeah, I mean, we are. Like I said, we are looking at a period in time where we are literally just getting out of the whole cowboys and Indians.
Well, and actually, this came out around the time, the American. The Native American version of the civil rights movement really got going. Yeah, it's kicking off.
We're talking about the height of the Civil War, the height of the Vietnam War.
Yeah.
1969. Vietnam War's it's been going a while, to put it mildly. I think it's pre-Tet, isn't it? Was Tet 71?
People are. Yeah, I mean, but by this point in the time, this film is like people have turned against it.
People are very much against the Vietnam War at this point. And he's kind of... I was very surprised that John Wayne's character brought her to him. Because there's a lot going on in the fact that he brought her to him to treat a snake bite. There's the acknowledgement of native medicine.
It wasn't her that was brought. Oh yeah, yeah, she is brought to him at the end of the movie. Like, but the bit where the scene where they actually have speaking roles is when LaBeef is brought to get his hands.
I'm getting there.
Yeah.
There's the acknowledgement of native medicine, but it's already been undercut by the fact that she tells him about germs.
Yeah.
And she's white. And she's a child telling a grown-ass man whose job it is to treat wounds, how to treat wounds, and he does it better than him.
Yeah.
So he's already been undercut in that way, but there is the acknowledgement of a knowledge that he has.
Yeah.
There's also the sense of that his loyalty is never questioned. It's questioned in jest, but it is in jest. And it's in such a way that he is not a threat to them. They can joke about, quote-unquote, Indians taking scalps because it's funny now. They can afford to joke because they're in a position of power over him, and he's in a position where he has to go along with it.
Yeah.
Hence why I said this is not the treatment of him is not particularly progressive. But for the time, I can see why they thought that was a good way to do it. Because that was the attitude. Times change very quickly. And I will say, even 10 years ago, this film would have still been all right. We're talking 10 years ago was 2010.
I think 10. I'll double check, but I think 10 years ago is when the remake came out.
Yeah, 2011.
Yes.
So this film was still,
years,
this film was still acceptable in 2011.
Nope, 2010.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think it was released in 2011 though. The data on it on Amazon is 2011.
Well, but you say roughly
we're
10
splitting
years.
hairs. Let's be honest.
Yeah, we're splitting hairs here.
And in film terms, that's nothing.
Yeah.
So
you probably late 2010, early 2011.
All right, let me put it this way.
Yeah.
There's a black man in the White House, and this film is still acceptable.
Yeah.
This is post-economic crash, and this film is still acceptable to remake.
Yeah.
Yeah.
With that kind of attitude it has towards minorities. That is an undercurrent, and it's still considered acceptable to put that on screen.
But again, it's it's America. Considering, I don't know if either one of you knows what the first ever movie shown in the White House was. It's come a long way. Let's just say that much.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. I think the response Michelle Obama got for telling people about that says it all.
For anyone who does not know, the first ever movie that was actually shown in the White House was a movie called Birth of a Nation, which was very much very much, should we say, glorifying the Ku Klux Klan.
It was a KKK propaganda piece.
Absolutely. Yeah.
It absolutely was. And the fact that, when Michelle Obama stood up and said, well, the White House was built by black people, was built by slaves, and the backlash she got for that.
Yeah.
America doesn't know its own history. And Ox, absolutely. Could you put Ox's comment up? Because this is an important one.
Yeah.
No film's ever given a fair and truthful representation of the native people. Their struggle for equality is still going on, but now it's overshadowed by BLM and LGBT movements. But I will say, I don't know a lot about the native movements. It's not my place to speak for native peoples.
No.
Yeah.
There is absolutely, I sincerely hope we have got to the point, early LGBT movements throughout half of the alphabet, as it were, early civil rights throughout a lot of unpalatable members of the black community. I hope we are getting to a point within activist movements where we aren't just fighting for ourselves anymore. I hope we're getting to that point.
Could I make
I know we have a long way to go.
Could I make a very quick suggestion here that if we ever get to covering, shall we say, the way Native Americans are treated in movies or whatever, if we ever do an episode on that's something we ought to bring Ox in for.
I wouldn't want to discuss that topic specifically without someone of at least native descent talking.
Hence, kind of why I was saying if we do, let's bring Ox in.
But equally, I wouldn't want to put Ox on the spot now and say, "Do you want to do that?"
Well,
we are all fighting.
I'm actually saying Ox if you want to.
If you want to, you would not be a token in there. I would make damn sure of it. And I know Win would as well.
There are a couple of movies coming up in December that it might be a good idea.
Yeah, if Ox is up for it, no pressure at all on you, Ox. You know, your emotional labor is valuable, but if you want to, by all means, you know. And yes, we are all fighting the same fight, and the fight for equality and for equity is something that is we shouldn't leave anyone behind. I don't think. I did not know that about you, Ox. Again, I genuinely don't know enough about the Native American struggle and history to say anything of value here. But yeah, we're all fighting the same fight, and if there's ever anything I can do to add my hand to help with the struggle,
I know bits and pieces because American West was something I had to study for my GCSE at school. Let's just put it this way: my teacher was very impressed that I bought a book to class called "Bury My Heart at Wounded Knee" by D. Brown.
That was on my reading list at undergrad. So,
which is a long old read, but it is a very good.
It's well worth it.
History of the West, but I suppose it's one of the the first real books that really, I suppose, gives the native side of the story to some extent.
Okay, and for context, "Bury My Heart at Wounded Knee" was published the year after this movie came out.
Yeah. So we are this movie was very much released into a time where white people weren't listening and didn't care to listen. And there wasn't a lot there for them, even if they did. There is I'm not going to say that makes them blameless, because it doesn't. And they were responsible for creating an environment where those kind of books could be released. And by that, I mean they should have been responsible for that, as opposed to they made that happen, because they didn't. But they should have been responsible for that and open to that. As with any minority group. But I genuinely don't know enough about it, and I hold my hands up and say that I've read a couple of books, seen a couple of films, documentaries, that kind of thing. It is not my platform to speak on, but I absolutely am interested in learning, and, as the saying goes, hearing the truth from the horse's mouth.
Yeah.
But and I think if Ox is willing to, there's always a platform here for you.
There are a couple of movies coming up in Animation Month that might be a bit of a minefield.
Yeah, there is one thing as well I will say. I do want to try and avoid, if we can, the fallacy of and the pitfall of not being native and saying that one voice we have speaks for all. Ox, you speak for yourself and for your own history. As with anything, I speak for myself and my own history. But especially with natives and the different tribes and everything else, we don't want to say this one native person speaks for all native people.
And given the geography, it may not be a minefield that you're prepared to walk into.
And if you don't, that's also fine.
Yeah.
It would be nice if we could find someone who
You're
was tribally associated.
Okay. End of the day, you're cool. You're cool.
Your call. Your call, but we will. We're not going to put anything on you or demand anything of you. You're not willing to do.
If you feel comfortable doing it, by all means. If you don't, you don't feel like it's something you want to do.
Yeah.
Fair enough.
Nor do we expect you to claim to speak for anyone you don't. So yeah, we take it as given.
I guess we can kind of, I suppose, look at what we know of the history or whatever it is, but it's a bit like, let's put it this way. I don't want to, we don't want to speak for on behalf of anyone. Like, for example, when Pride Month was going on, if you remember, there was that stream where I deliberately decided I needed to sit this one out, because even though I like to consider myself an ally, sometimes being an ally means getting the fuck out of the way and letting people minorities have their voice.
Yeah. And I will say that I was quite touched that you did that. That was a really really good of you. And I think that's what, as allies to Native peoples and the Native struggle, that obviously we can't say we're not going to appear on stream, because then there wouldn't be a stream. But definitely there's a place for you if you want to join us.
I just saw Ox put in the chat they speak on behalf like Lakota, and so if we ever do anything, any movies around like the Lakota or like Little Bighorn or something, Ox, we got to get you. I'm sorry, I'm desperate to get you. If we do any movies that relate to like anything to do with Sitting Bull, Crazy Horse Battle, Little Bighorn, anything like that, we got to get you. I think. I'm sorry.
I think that's why Ring wants you for December, Ox.
Yeah.
Yeah. And speaking of which, I did send a DM.
Cool.
With more specific details.
We've kind of gone off.
Yeah, okay. I've generally trod through that minefield now.
I'm just saying, we probably need to wrap up here, and I think we've gone well off topic. So
yeah, we have.
Yeah, I appear to have shown back up for the end.
Yeah.
Ox, I love that. I love that. Could you put that up? What Ox has just put in the chat? That's beautiful. I love that. I want that embroidered on a cowl or something.
That is perfect. Perfect.
For those listening and not watching, it reads, "A smart person knows when to stand back and admire the rainbow instead of chasing it." And that's beautiful. Yeah. I love it. And a little winky face at the end there. We all know what you mean by it. But yeah, I think that's a great way of summing up how we would like to approach any discussion on the Native struggle.
Yeah.
But yeah, we've discussed that in the film. Is there any other aspect of the film we want to discuss? I'm just grabbing my notes again. Because I threw them down there for some stupid reason.
I have nothing because, as I said, I didn't get to the end. I unfortunately didn't get to the end of this movie today. I got about halfway to 2/3 in before I had to.
Okay.
Yeah.
Do you want to disappear so we can discuss the ending, or are you happy with spoilers?
You've already given me spoilers. What the hell?
Yeah. So, found family, and the one thing I sent Ring a message, and I said, I guarantee you, this girl ends up as a spinster.
Yeah.
And she's resigned to it. She knows that she's the kind of woman who doesn't make a good wife in this culture, which is a shame.
Yeah, she knows she's not going to settle down.
Yeah, she knows she's not going to get married. She knows she's not going to have a family with her.
Her version of settling down is she's going to run the ranch.
Yeah. And the ranch will probably go to one of her brothers when they reach maturity, or their kids. She's the spinster aunt in the making.
Yeah.
But she's found her family in Rooster, and he's found his family in her, in a way. And
basically, little sister becomes more than just like a nickname, a somewhat demeaning nickname.
Yeah, and I think the thing with that is him calling her little sister. I don't think he ever meant it in a demeaning way,
or
ever.
Like not demeaning. What's the word? Condescending.
slightly condescending, yes, but it definitely became more affectionate as the film went on. And I do love at the end, I've got to talk about this comment he makes with the lawyer. We finally meet the big lawyer that she draws like a gun, and he's this squat little bloke with glasses, and he's nothing special to look at. But I do love the comment that's passed between them of the lawyer pays him because she's getting her affairs set in order because she's paying her debts, and then also another $200 for saving her life. And you're almost expecting, I half expected him to refuse that money because of and you almost wonder if he did later on hand it back to her or something.
Yeah.
But there's a joke, he's got all the money, and it tells you how little he wants the money, and that this job became more than a job to him, and she became important to him. When the lawyer says she doesn't realise how sick she is and she's probably not going to make it. And he picks up the money and he says, all of this, and it's $275. So a lot of money, considering he's normally paid $2 for every man he brings back for the hangman's noose. So a lot of money. Holds it up and he says, I bet you all this she makes it back.
But lawyer Daggett won't take the bet.
And he won't bet against her.
Yeah.
And she has a reputation. And she's earned that reputation. She's earned that respect.
That's the sort of stubbornness I aspire to have.
Yes. That's the kind of stubbornness you aspire to have when even the people who didn't believe you were capable enough are willing to bet on you at the end of it.
Yeah, that's the kind of stubbornness that can be defined as true grit.
True grit. Yeah. Even in the face of death, you wouldn't bet against this girl.
Yeah.
And it's interesting that we go from that scene and then we get the time skip.
Yeah.
And he comes back to see her, and she's healthy, but her arm's still broken, but she's healthy. Which tells us she's recovered. It's going to be less than 6 weeks after she fell ill, because 6 weeks is about the time for a break.
Though it is at least a month or two, because there's snow on the ground, and in all of the earlier scenes, the leaves were still green.
Yeah, and her dad's so it's a good 6 weeks, 6 to 8 weeks.
Yeah.
She's probably due to have that cast off any day.
Yeah.
And she's at her father's graveside. And this film is kind of... Chantilly Lace ends in the same way at a cemetery with the guy riding off into the sunset. But obviously that's more of a love story.
Yeah.
So it's a classic sort of Western trope. Saying goodbye to the dead, saying goodbye to the past, and riding out into the future is what's going on with John Wayne.
Well, actually, ironically, John Wayne isn't riding out into the sunset into the frontier. He's riding back to town.
Yeah, he's riding to modernity, to all that. So again, it's this film again feels more like a commentary on the Western than a Western.
Yeah.
And it's definitely John Wayne's handing over the reins to the younger generation in Clint Eastwood with this film. Yeah. But this conversation she has with him about, knowing where you're going to be buried, having a home, that's classic Western stuff.
Yeah.
But this whole found family thing, as she says to him, I want you to rest next to me. So she says, my father rests here. My mum will go next to him. My brothers and their families will go on the other side. I'll go here on his right-hand side.
Yeah, my brother and his family will go there. My baby sister and her family will go there.
Yeah. I will rest here at my father's right side, and I want you next to me.
Yeah.
And yet there is never throughout this film a hint of romance. Thank God, she's only 14, for Christ's sake.
Yeah.
I'm all for age gaps in fiction, but that's pushing it.
Yeah.
That would have been gross. That would have been gross.
Yeah. Okay, even I know. Yes, you can say historically things were a little different, but yeah, in modern film, modern sensibilities. I'm glad we didn't go there. I'm just very glad it didn't go there.
Yeah, because that's almost, it's taking that trope of, you know, the knight errant and his girl who's been married to him at 14, but he's way, you know, it's that sort of medieval thing taken and modernized a little bit by not going there. And you know, but it's that found family of she's given him somewhere to come home to.
Yeah.
And she's not just saying to him, look, this is your final resting place. She's telling him, you can always come to me to rest. So no matter what he goes out and does, you know, he's a lawman, whatever he's doing, he can always come home to her. And that's what she's offering him.
Basically, he's got a home, he's got a family.
She's basically stepped into that role as his spinster sister, basically.
Yeah.
And they're both the kind of people who aren't going to marry. And she knows that. She knows she's not the kind of person to marry. So, she knows he's not the kind of person to marry.
I will say something else. It's also interesting that Rooster only shows his, like, the fire in his, you know, the fire in his belly when his age is put on the table.
Yeah, he's obviously very sensitive about it.
Yeah, because, you know, first is, I call that pretty big talk for a one-eyed fat man. Feel your hand, you son of a bitch. And then at the end, Maddie says he's a little old to be jumping, that Rooster's a little old to be jumping fences. And then he goes and jumps. Fences.
Yeah, and he goes and jumps it.
Yeah.
I've still got it.
Yeah.
And Clint Eastwood, I hope you're watching. Because that's quite clearly a demonstration of that. But as we've discussed at length.
As we said earlier, hey Clint, I know you're the future, but I'm not ready to pass the torch just yet.
Yeah. It's and I hate to make this comparison with such a terrible film, but if you've ever seen the film Biker Boys, where
why did you have to do that, Noodle? Why did you mention that?
I know,
movie?
but it's thematically appropriate. He races the older guy, the leader of the club, as it were, beats him, but hands him his helmet back and only comes and takes it at the end when the guy's ready to retire. And that's what's going on. It's the same thematic elements.
It is the same thematic thing, but the word.
That's not a recommendation for that film. It's a terrible film.
I'll just say, even Sons of Anarchy is more accurate about motorcycle MC clubs than Biker Boys.
So I say this with all humour. I take it that's to add to my watch list then.
No.
Yes, along with Chantilly Lace and the Waltons and
Biker Boys is awful.
So, anything else that are have you finished your thought on the ending?
The thing with the snow is the imagery of the snow.
Yeah.
Snow is always representative of death.
Yeah.
Of winter.
Basic pathetic fallacy.
Basic pathetic fallacy going on there. And there is that going on. I think in the remake, I read something about it's actually done where there's a time skip to when she's older and he's died and she's burying him, which I don't think is very good.
Yeah.
From what I've read of it, and again, I've only read a summary.
As I pointed out, I have not seen the end of this movie, but obviously you're saying it's sort of snowing at the end.
Yeah.
I mean, I always draw if anyone's seen the Clint Eastwood film Pale Rider and how that ends.
Again, another film I walked out of.
It is again, instead of him because of the theme of that movie or whatever, it's very different. Look, it's very different. And instead of the cowboy riding off into the sunset, he's riding off into the distance, but it's like a really cold, dank, sort of snow-covered. It's got a whole different vibe. And if we ever cover Pale Rider, we can get into the reasons why
Yeah.
why that was more appropriate.
I do think the ending of this film, though, does subvert the pathetic fallacy of the snow, because there is still a hopefulness to this ending, but it's a different kind of hopefulness. It's not a go forth and explore. It's a you always have somewhere to come home to kind of ending. And it's a lot mushier in that sense.
And you may be old, but you've still got quite a ways to live.
Yeah, and she's basically saying to him, "Go out and live, but you'll always have somewhere to come to." And this is your legacy. Like it's almost like she's telling him, his son. He admits hates him, doesn't like him, and he doesn't particularly like his son. She's almost become his adopted daughter.
Yeah,
his adopted little sister,
and he's almost become a not exact a pseudo father
figure to her,
because she gives him her father's gun.
Yeah, and she gives him her father's gun, but I think what she's promising him with the space in the family plot is she expects to outlive him. This is natural. She's a lot younger than him. She's a teenager. He's a grown man. He's getting on in years. She's promising him the same thing that she's giving her father, which is someone to tend his grave and remember him.
Yeah.
And I think I mentioned this last week as well, the Roman saying of you die twice. Once when you die and once when someone says your name for the last time. And what she's promising him is there will be someone to say your name when you're dead. There will be someone to tend your grave and remember you.
You've
built a legacy. Yeah, you've built a legacy by being a good man and saving my life. And there's a line there's another film. If anyone's ever seen Defiance, there's a comment that's passed by the Jewish teacher of when you save a life, you become responsible for it. This is in the Torah. I don't know if it is. I don't know if it's just a line for the film. I'm not Jewish. I haven't read the Torah.
Yeah.
Don't at me.
Never,
I presume it seems like a thing. And Daniel Craig's character pretends like he doesn't understand, but actually he's just taking responsibility for like 50 people. So after saving their lives, so it's juxtaposition there, and it's a bit of there's a thing going on. But that's a totally different film. That's what this is saying here. They've almost taken responsibility for each other because they've saved each other. She saved him sort of emotionally and morally, but he literally saved her life, and that's what's formed the bond between them.
Yeah.
And that feeds into the whole biblical religious undercurrent of this film and her religious attitude.
I almost feel like the impression I'm getting of the ending is you can't get rid of me that easily.
Yeah, basically.
Yeah.
It can, but I think that's the attitude of the whole film. But the ending of it is you can't get rid of me that easily. And now she's saying, "Okay, I will stay home now, but remember you've got someone to come to. Remember, I followed you, and I will wait for you."
And Rooster's name did live on because there was a remake made.
Yeah, there was a remake made. But also the idea is she would have put a stone up for him. And I love the line in the film. They got her father's stone wrong, and so she's going to argue with the stonemason.
Yeah.
So not only is she respecting her father's memory by burying him and tending the grave, which she's promising to do for Rooster, she's going to make sure it's right. And because you've seen the whole film, when you've seen what she's like, you believe it.
Yeah.
That's
I've always said, and again,
my father bought horses for breedings, but those 4 are all geldings. You can't breed geldings.
Again, I'm going to say, slight side joke here. If I ever had anything on my tombstone, it'd be something along the line of what Spike Milligan had put on his, which just said, "I told you I was ill."
Yeah, but it's the principle of the thing, and that's the thing about this character of Mattie. Throughout this film, she's principled.
Yeah,
and she stands by, and she's willing to kill and die for her principles, literally.
Yeah.
And that's what I like about her, and I think that's why she makes such a good protagonist. And why the people around her like her and let her get away with so much impudence. Let's be honest. She wouldn't make a good soldier because she can't follow orders.
Yeah.
But she's not someone you don't want on your side in a fight either.
Oh
Yeah.
no.
I do like her, and I think it's because I hope that
I would not
I
want her
like
as an
her,
enemy.
but-
I'll say that much.
Yeah.
I would not want her as an enemy because she is driven.
Mm.
You know, in that respect.
And she is definitely the kind of person who she'll fight an argument on the principle of it. Even if she's going to gain nothing, she'll fight it on the principle of it.
Or to borrow a phrase from another franchise, she is a character of unique focus.
Yes. But she ain't killing anyone with a... Well, actually, no, you could say she killed that guy with a pen. She definitely bankrupted him with a pen.
Yeah.
But Rooster is the guy you send to kill the boogeyman.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. And this is what happens when the boogeyman and the guy you send to kill the boogeyman team up. It's these two. I will say as well, there's a great line in The Godfather that I've got to reference in reference to this, especially as Robert Duvall's in this film. Tom Hagen became a lawyer, and it's in the book. Tom Hagen became a lawyer because the Godfather told him, you can bring down one man with a gun. A lawyer with a pen can kill more men than a man with a gun.
And
Very
Maddie
true.
draws her lawyer like a gun.
Yeah, and that made me laugh so much because having read the Godfather film, that quote always sticks out to me. And there's a lot of that. That's who she is. She'd make a damn fine lawyer, but she wouldn't make a great defense lawyer. She'd make a brilliant prosecution lawyer, brilliant contract lawyer. She wouldn't make a great defense lawyer because she's the kind of person who, if she knew the person she was defending was guilty, she'd walk into the courtroom, put her papers down, and go, "Your Honor, lock the fucker up. He's guilty."
Yeah,
that's what she'd do.
Or I've already drawn up the contract.
Literally.
Yeah.
She's a chess player. She's 2 steps ahead of everyone else around her.
Yeah.
Your Honor, my defendant is a dumbass for coming to me.
Yeah, basically.
Yeah.
And that's what I mean by she's principled. She's not the kind of person who could say, "Don't tell me if you did it or not. I don't want to know." She's tell me you didn't do it and I'll defend you, but you better not lie to me. That's her attitude.
So, any final thoughts?
Very quick, and I said I didn't even get. Started watching this earlier today. I'd never watched True Grit. Unfortunately, I didn't quite get to the end. I got about maybe 2/3 of the way through. Even though I know some spoilers now, I am still going to go and watch the end of this later. Fantastic movie. I will say, yes, very much a classic Western, but at the same time, as we discussed today, also very subtly subvert some of the classic Western in certain ways as well with this. That's my final thought, really.
Do you know what I like about this film? You don't have to be steeped in Western to understand that he's commenting on Westerns.
Yeah.
Case in point.
I feel like this stream is an excuse for me to go and bully my Uncle Mark about borrowing one of his copies of True Grit.
One of his copies.
Well, he has at least...
it all.
I feel like I don't know he has multiple copies, but I know him and I'm fairly certain he does.
Yeah.
In the same way, you know that I've got multiple copies of The Godfather, you know he's got multiple copies of True Grit. Yeah. And yes, I do have multiple copies of The Godfather, don't at me.
I figured.
I've got multiple copies of the Blues Brothers, so you know.
Yeah.
One final thought from me. Yes, Cogburn is shown as, skirting the line, but it, like, earlier in the movie, you know, when the defense attorney is grilling him, but it's very much in a, you know, shoot first, ask questions later, I'm getting my man kind of thing. Now, the only time he's actually shown as doing something blatantly questionably illegal, very likely blatantly illegal, is when Maddie's life is on the line.
There's one other instance.
Yeah. Okay.
Moon's deadlift. Sorry, you can hear the Jamaican coming out in me now. Moon's estate.
Oh yeah.
But Matty puts him on the straight and narrow.
Yeah. Well, that's you know, less, you know, that's more adhering to a promise than doing something blatantly unlawful.
Yeah, but that's the moral aspect of the character.
But yeah, that, you know, I'm talking more law as opposed to morals. And what I'm referring to is when he, without questioning who these guys are, just hijacks a cart.
The thing is, though, the line he delivers there, "I'm borrowing your cart."
Yeah.
You kind of get the impression he's got the intention of returning it. And the only reason he's pointing a gun at them is because they went for theirs first.
Yeah.
And he's desperate. Matty's dying.
Yeah.
That's the last act of a desperate man.
Yeah, Maddie's dying of a, spoilers, snake bite.
We've discussed the snake bite in depth already. That spoiler alert's a bit late.
That's a bit redundant now.
I don't know that I was around for that bit. However, I was aware of it because I read multiple synopses.
This is valid.
Also, as someone who knows a thing about rattlers, why the fuck? No, it's like, you don't fucking swat at a rattlesnake, especially when it's rattling.
Listen, this thing's coming at me.
It
wants to eat me. It might be the wrong thing to do, but my instinct is going to be to try and fight it.
It's a little it's a bit like the old adage about don't poke the bear. Same thing, don't swat the snake.
Well, also the adage, you know, of it's more frightened of you than you are of it.
Wow. Sorry, I'm just reading Ox's comment. That's cool. That's cool. We need you for when we do Mob Month as well.
Yeah. But anyways, any final...
I'm a little curious about the date on that, because Gotti was locked up before then.
Yeah. Any final thoughts?
Well, Sam's not seen the film, so...
Sam's not seen the film. I've not seen the whole of the film. What I've seen, I've really enjoyed. To the point that even though I already know it's going to happen now because of this stream, I'm still going to go and watch this. And I'm going to probably make a point of watching the remake as well.
And in terms of, well, okay, it's Golden Globes, not Oscars, but in terms of Academy Awards, this one was definitely earned.
Yeah.
Because when Best Actor goes to an actor who's late in his career, it's kind of seen as this is something you earned in an earlier movie that we're just now acknowledging. He earned this. True Grit is probably his best, is widely regarded as his best role. You know, Rooster Cogburn is widely regarded as his best role, and
this is John Wayne's most iconic role, in my opinion. I got to say, I didn't watch too many John Wayne movies. I mean, the only other one I really liked was The Cowboys, which Bruce Dern was the only person I could ever remember to actually kill John Wayne in the movie. But
the only two I remember, the only two I remember seeing are, aside from True Grit, are The Man Who Shot Liberty Valance and The Quiet Man, which actually wasn't a Western.
Also, for the record, I have mentioned it. Don't bother watching Green Berets.
Yeah.
No, that's another one for you to put on the list, Sam.
I have watched that, and I will concur with Noodle.
And once again, like what I said for the Golden Globes applies to the Oscar. It wasn't a pity Oscar.
No, it wasn't. Nor was it. This was your life. This is a recognition of your life.
Yeah. I'll just say, I'm sorry, I'm going to be honest. I'm not doubting your story, Ox, and yeah, you could very, but I just think it was earlier than you think it was. It's probably because Gotti was locked up for life by 92 at the latest, so it may have been earlier than you remember. That's all I'm saying on that, because I know Gotti was in prison for life at the latest by 92.
92, he was convicted.
But okay,
Yeah.
So final thoughts.
Kind of gave mine in the. Guess I have to go watch this now.
Yeah.
Yeah. If you want to watch an intelligent Western, this is the one to watch.
Yeah, I will say if you're going to watch a classic, like lawmen and outlaws Western, True Grit is the one to watch.
Final thought.
I think that does it a disservice, but
Never.
No, I mean if you're going to watch a classic era Western, watch True Grit. That was my point.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Final thought. And it's a very simple thing. Never shoot a wild turkey with a Sharps carbine.
Yes.
More lead than turkey in the end of it.
Yeah.
Yep. I'm all in favour of stuffing, but lead stuffing isn't so good.
No. It gets caught in your teeth.
Also, if you're bringing a Sharps carbine, don't try and wing a man. You might just kill his horse.
What was the comment she passed? If you try and wing him, you probably kill him with that gun.
Yeah.
Which I think said it all. Hey, Ox, you're going to be happy next week.
Yeah, but The Good, the Bad, and the Ugly isn't a classic era Western. It's a spaghetti Western.
That's yeah. Good segue, though, Ox. Good segue, Ox.
So brief tangent for Shilling. Next week we are talking A Fistful of Dollars.
Are we? I thought we were doing Good, the Bad, the Ugly next week.
I would just say we could do The Good, the Bad, the Ugly, Noodle, but it is a 3-hour long movie.
Okay, let's do Fistful of Dollars.
It's a brilliant movie. So I think maybe Fistful of Dollars, and we can table The Good, the Bad, and the Ugly for later, I think.
I have an exam next week. I'm not watching a 3-hour movie.
Yeah, so Fistful of Dollars.
Cool.
But okay, final thoughts. Did everyone do their final thoughts?
Yeah.
Pretty much,
okay.
Yeah.
So Shilling, of course, Secular D&D is back on. And if you watched yesterday's episode, the next episode is going to rightly be called the Great Gladiator Massacre.
What did Santi do this time?
Well, it wasn't exactly Santi's fault. They walked into a Mexican standoff because there's currently a power vacuum in Marrakesh.
Okay, what did Julie do this time?
Well, they freed a genie that was rather miffed about being kept underneath the Colosseum. and the Colosseum happened to be, happened to be unwisely adjacent to the Temple Palace.
Basically, you've based it on Central Rome.
Yeah. So, when the genie took down the Colosseum, it also took down the main governmental center. So every faction that had been hiding in the shadows, trying to manipulate themselves into a position in power, are now making a blatant power grab.
Damn it, we don't talk about our war crimes.
So, when the party went into the, their hideout base with the Thieves Guild, we had a group of Grung mind-controlled assassins and a group of Warforged from the House of Illus being directed by an Illithid. And then the gladiators protecting the Kuotoa in the middle. And they decided to light that powder keg.
Are you sure it wasn't Santa's fault? That definitely sounds like something Santa caused.
Actually, it was Longus. It was Longus that decided to go into initiative.
See, his...
Yes, I can see Sam doing that.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay. So tune in for secular D&D next week to see how they get out of this situation.
I have a backlog of secular D&D that I want to try and go through and binge.
Yeah, and also, unfortunately, one of the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles was murdered in less than a round by a pair of assassins.
As long as it wasn't Leonardo, I'm okay.
It was Leonardo.
Oh dear.
He just happened to be on that side of the room.
Yeah.
Yeah. Good luck with that. I say that to you as the DM. Good luck with that.
And of course, next week, we are talking A Fistful of Dollars, as mentioned before, and I am currently in a race to the nearest 100 with Godless Scummer and Godless Sowing. And if I beat them, I will be doing my celebratory embarrassing story stream while drinking. So, if you want to watch me get plastered on a single cider live on stream, get your friends to subscribe to my channel, please.
It will only take a single cider.
Can I just point out as well that it is very, very finely poised right now.
Yeah.
I've had a little head start because we are talking to the nearest 100. I have had a several year start on Ring and Sewing, so I have got more subscribers. However, to the nearest 100, we've literally pretty much pulled level now.
I lost a subscriber when you pulled level with me and
Sewing. I'm pretty sure you're one behind me in Sewing. I believe the last time I checked. YouTube's a bit weird because it takes every time you think you're going where. I'll just say this: subscribe to all three of us, please.
Yeah.
Subscribe to me. Subscribe to Ring. Subscribe to Sewing.
You know what I'd really like to see?
Go on.
I want Ring and Scummer drinking, Scummer and Sewing with a joint all on the same stream.
Yeah.
Bearing in mind that pot's illegal here, Noodle, I don't think it's a good idea for me to be smoking
that's why I said Ring and Scummer drinking and Will with a joint. Because I know
I'm currently at 176. I'm trying to get to 200.
So what I'm hearing is if Jeff gets too close, I have to temporarily unsubscribe so that Ring can get there first.
Yeah, pretty much.
Yeah, pretty much.
Let's put it this way. I'm a late entrant into this race, okay, and I think Ring and Will have been around 76, 77 or whatever. I was at 70 about 5 days ago, and I'm now at 77. So I've had a little bump.
Well, there you go. That's what you've got to do, folks. You've got to get ring drunk.
Ring, you could have been, and I'll just point out, Ring, I don't know if you know the video that did it for me. If you'd been on the ball, you'd have been able to fucking leave us in the dust. I did a Kent Hovind video because he got arrested, and had you done that and like done your voice, you would have you would have reached your target by now.
Yeah, but given what he got arrested for, it's not exactly apropos for me to pull out the Kent Hovind.
That's fair enough. Because I will admit, when I did it, if anybody's seen it, I wasn't laughing, joking, or taking the piss out of Kent because it was too serious of a matter. I felt to.
Yeah.
I have no idea what he got arrested for, but it's Kent Hovind.
Domestic abuse.
Yeah.
Ooh. Yeah, not funny. Yeah.
Okay.
Also, that's another thing I liked about this film. There was no violence against women, which, again, for a Western.
Right. Okay.
I mean, there is the scene with LaBeef and Maddie, where LaBeef.
Yes, but it's not glorified, is what I mean.
Yeah. Fair enough.
I'm just gonna. Okay, I'm gonna just show what I've got coming up now. Then, I don't have a date. Hopefully, sometime in the next few days. Trying to get this sorted out with people may know that I covered Wits It Gets It getting arrested at Mount Rushmore, which was hilarious. I'm hoping to get OPT Lawyer to come on and react to that same video. So we'll actually have a legal, someone with a very much more an actual legal background who knows what the fuck they're talking about. Watching this dipshit, flat earther, getting arrested at Mount Rushmore. So I'm hoping that will happen in the next couple of days. We're just kind of trying to work on a time that suits both of us at the moment. Wednesday, I think it's at 8 p.m. UK time. I have Phoebe J. Rose coming onto my channel. Which I think is going to be an interesting discussion because people don't know Phoebe. Please go and check her out. But given her past, she is a trans woman, but at one time in her life was a member of the English Defence League and was very much into the far right. But she's come away from that now. And we're going to have a conversation because I think Phoebe and I were probably on the very opposite sides of some of the same demonstrations in the past. So I think this could be a really cool conversation.
That sounds interesting. I've spoken to Phoebe before. Very interesting character, and I'm sure a lot of interesting stories for you both to share there.
Yeah. Having spoken to Phoebe before, certainly an interesting person.
Yeah. And Sam?
So, I said last week that we weren't going to have any issues with me uploading an episode of Pub Religion. Then my laptop broke. My laptop is now fixed again. So we should be all good. Though I will probably not be at the premiere because I am going away tomorrow morning.
Anywhere nice?
Malton.
Nice.
Yeah.
So not too far from your end of the woods.
So.
Well, you're always welcome for a cuppa.
And I usually end up having to catch everything on VOD anyways. Because I have the best sleeping and work schedule in the world, they said sarcastically.
I love how, this is why I'm so glad you're easygoing about your pronouns, because if you can't get them right, what chance do the rest of us stand?
Yeah. No, seriously, half the time my gender is locked up in Schrodinger's fucking box.
Ring, how dare you assume your gender?
Anyways.
See, this is actually one of the ways I have to introduce my dad to my non-binary friends. This is my dad. He can't get his own pronouns right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Noodle, anything coming up other than Fistful of Dollars next week?
No, I have exams and things going on. I'm currently studying a master's degree, so I'm not very present. If anything like major happens on the news that I happen to run across on Twitter and I've got an opinion on, I'll probably like randomly put up a stream. But other than that,
Yeah,
not likely. But definitely in for Fistful of Dollars, and as always, I'm on Twitter. If you see that my Twitter is locked, that's because I'm currently in the process of like potentially changing jobs. That's why. And it's been quite a lively week for me on Twitter this week. You know, it's a lively week when your follower count goes down.
Oh boy.
Yeah, less said about that, the better, I think. But yeah, I'm fairly lively on Twitter, and if you find my fandom Twitter, even more so. But if you do find my fandom Twitter, heed my warnings, and especially if you find my fan fiction, read the tags. Yeah.
Something
And,
dead does do not eat.
yeah. And with
Yeah,
that,
just dead dove do not eat. Apply. I need that on a t-shirt.
yeah,
That's the warning label above my head in video games.
yeah. And with that, I think we'll move to taglines. Noodle?
Take care, be good, and if you can't be good, remember, always use your noodle.
See you later, guys. Take care. Salute.
And have a day, and remember, communication is key.
And remember, the purpose of a storyteller is not to tell you how to think, but to give you questions to think on. Too often, we forget that.